This is Adam Graham from Pretty Much the Present, bringing you a week of old-time radio podcasts. These episodes were originally released back in 2011, and we're releasing them here pretty much as is, with only some extraneous bits such as the opening from all of the episodes after the first episode removed. Because these are old, it should be noted that any offers or promotions mentioned in the episode may not be valid unless they're currently mentioned on the Great Detectives website. Here now is a week of old-time radio detective podcast.
Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, feel free to email me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Give us a call, 208-991-4783, and become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Radio Detectives. Well, today's episode of the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio is brought to you by the financial support of our listeners. Thank you so much. There were actually only 5 weeks worth of episodes between last week's show and this one. This one is from February 15th of 1953, and it's called The Girl on the Doorstep.
Bromo Seltzer and NBC present William Gargan, starring as Barrie Craig, confidential investigator.
I wonder if murderers, like other people, worry about their income taxes. When they make a killing, for example, do they always report it, or do they just list their victims under buried assets?
Bromo Seltzer, famous for fast relief of headache and upset stomach, and the National Broadcasting Company present William Gargan in another transcribed drama of mystery and adventure with America's #1 detective, Barrie Craig, confidential investigator.
This is Bill Gargan. Before I tell you about tonight's story, which I call The Girl on the Doorstep, here is a word from Bromo Seltzer, famous for fast relief of upset stomach as well as headache.
Miss Jordan, report to clinic. Miss Jordan, report to clinic. Miss Jordan.
In recent clinical research, nurses reported that sparkling, refreshing Bromo Seltzer relieved distress of stomach acidity and nervous indigestion better, more effectively than other leading upset stomach remedies tested. You see, Bromo Seltzer contained sodium citrate, one of the finest ingredients known to doctors for the relief of acid indigestion. And only Bromo Seltzer gently relieves nervous tension so often associated with upset stomach. Next time you have acid indigestion, take Bromo Seltzer. Like so many nurses, you too may agree.
For upset stomach, Bromo Seltzer works best.
Remember, for prompt relief of stomach acidity as well as headache, take sparkling, refreshing Bromo Seltzer. For best results, use cool water, follow the label, avoid excessive use. And next time your stomach is upset, remember that many nurses report.
For upset stomach, Bromo Seltzer works best.
Barrie Craig speaking. I'd been to a movie. It was about a private eye who pinned a wreath on a murderer after an hour and a half of swallowing dry martinis, wrestling amorously with youthful blondes, and wearing a succession of the best pressed suits ever seen off a tailor's dummy. I decided to walk home. I wondered if there was a special license that a plain investigator like me could get that would make me like martinis and make blondes like me. It was close to 1 a.m. The air was raw and cold with the tang of metal in it you get in New York. The afternoon slush had hardened to ice underneath your feet, and I decided you'd probably need more than a license when I saw her. Halfway up the block, an apartment house lobby spilled some light out into the street. Enough light so I could see that she was young, redheaded, with that pale, almost transparent skin redheads sometimes have. The guy with her had his back to me. It was an old scene. He was probably making a play for a nightcap up in her apartment. She shook her head and moved into the doorway. He moved after her, maybe for a goodnight kiss. It was none of my business. I started walking. He must have tried for more than a kiss and wound up with a slap in the face. He came stumbling backwards out of the doorway, hit the ice on the pavement, and went down. I heard the door slam behind her. Either she hadn't noticed him fall or she didn't care. He wasn't moving when I got to him. The pavement can be pretty hard when you slap it with the back of your head. I tried shaking him, but he wasn't playing. I lifted his head, thinking maybe that might help bring him to, and then I eased it back onto the pavement. I couldn't be sure if the skull was broken, but by that time I was sure of something else. He'd quit breathing. Not a nice way to wind up a date with a pretty redhead. I thought she might want to know about it. There were a dozen names on the bellboard in the small lobby. Any one of them could have belonged to the redhead. I pushed the super's button. I tried the inside door. It was locked. A well-run apartment house. Supers probably need their sleep as much as anybody, but they frequently don't get it.
What do you want?
I'm sorry I had to wake you. There's been a small accident.
Yeah, what kind of an accident?
Somebody slipped on the ice in front of the building.
What are you, a lawyer?
No.
Nobody could have slipped in front of the building. I put plenty of ashes on the ice. It ain't slippery.
Well, come on and look for yourself.
Okay, but if you think you got a case...
I don't know the man. It's none of my business.
Well, if he thinks he's
Come on. And he's not thinking of suing anybody.
Maybe he ain't, but if you've been a super as long as I have, you know they're always looking for a chance to stick an insurance company.
You still think he's looking for anything?
Well, the guy's dead, ain't he?
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Uh-huh. I better call the police. Tell them to send an ambulance down, too, on the chance we're not such good diagnosticians.
Okay, sure.
And while you're doing that, I might as well break the news to the redhead.
Huh?
He'd brought her home, said goodnight to her when it happened.
You mean some girl in this building?
Yeah. Maybe 20, pale skin, red hair, pretty. You couldn't mistake her.
Mister, maybe you couldn't, but there ain't no girl like that living in this building.
The skin on my back crawled a bit when he let me have it. Then I shrugged it off. Maybe she was staying with some people in the building. The super wouldn't have to know about that. Maybe.
Yes, officer. He's laying out in front, just like he fell. Yeah. Well, there's some guy here who's seen it. Name's Craig. Yeah, we ain't tried moving him. Okay, officer. Well, I'll be right over.
Good. About that redhead.
Look, I've been super here for 7 years. I know every family in this building. They all been here for years.
Well, she might be staying with one of them.
There was some burglaries in the neighborhood the last couple of weeks. I checked on all the door keys. Today, there was nobody staying with nobody.
Well, it might have been a sudden...
She wouldn't have had no key.
She didn't have to have one. She could have pushed a button and... No.
No, huh?
I was too close. She'd have to wait for somebody to click the door catch down in the lobby. I'd have seen her.
Well, maybe she ducked out again.
Uh-uh.
So what does that mean?
I don't know what it means. Except maybe it's going to be quite a while before she finds out what happened to her date. It didn't take long for the police to arrive, or the ambulance. They moved pretty fast. They always do. They've had experience. And on this trip, they also had Lieutenant Rogers of Homicide.
Barrie?
Yeah, Lieutenant.
You're not curious enough.
The police doctor said the guy was dead, didn't
he? He's dead.
What should I be curious about?
About why I came down on an accident case.
I figured maybe it was on account of your college education.
What would that have to do with it?
I wouldn't know. I never went to college.
You're being a big help.
What do you want me to be helpful about?
I came down because when the report came in, your name was mentioned.
So you decided I was involved?
Aren't you?
No. You've got my story.
Yeah, you just happen to be walking, you just happen to notice the redhead and the corpse and so on.
That's right.
It's hard to believe.
Why? Because I'm an investigator, I don't have a right to witness an accident?
Not an accident that happened to Walter Barrie.
Barrie? That's the corpse?
That's the corpse.
I've heard the name before.
Sure you have. Walter Barley's a big man. Or was, in the Midwest.
In New York, he's just dead.
It could be a coincidence. He came here to collect a debt.
Owed by who?
He'd run a string of bookie joints here for years. He sold out maybe 6 months ago, went to Detroit. But he had trouble getting paid. So he came back.
He'll never get paid now. Who'd he sell out to?
We've got a couple of guesses.
Any names attached?
Mark Wheeler, Joe Carson.
Neither of them are redheads.
No. Barry, the boys went through the building. No redheads on the premises.
It's a pity. I've got a thought, though.
Yes?
Let's take a walk through the building.
All right. Any particular direction?
Yeah, along the hallway here. Should lead to the back door.
Oh?
Which should be locked. Well, let's see. But isn't.
The super's going to have to do some explaining. There have been burglaries.
The super's okay. Take a look at the lock.
The lock? It's been forced.
Yeah.
That's happy news for a local locksmith, perhaps, but where does it fit in?
I don't know. Might tell us how the girl got out of the building.
But that's not the problem, is it? It's how she got in that bothers me.
How much does it bother you?
Not much, I guess. Because it still remains an accident. Doesn't it?
Walter Barley went to the morgue. Lieutenant Rogers went back to headquarters, and Barry Craig bought a drink.
Here's your poison, Craig.
Thanks. Say, Mac,
Yeah?
suppose a man had an opinion about a horse. Where would he go to do something about it?
There's a cigar store on 3rd. The owner would be glad to listen to your opinions. Or the clerk over at the Armstrong Hotel.
No. That's for small opinions. I've got a king-size opinion.
Real big? Tell you, Craig, I wouldn't be surprised if you was to get a phone call first thing tomorrow.
Well, that'd be too late. I get nervous carrying big bills around. Who knows, I might lose them before morning.
Say, Craig, there's a new hot spot opened over on the west side.
Yeah?
Someplace in the 40s, I think. They call it the Three Aces. Got a wonderful floor show.
3 aces. Carson would be one, Wheeler another. Could be the third.
If I've been to one doctor, I've been to a dozen. Never did me any good, though. Some days I can't hear a thing.
Okay, Mac. Doesn't matter much about that third ace anyway. He's been trumped. The 3 aces was over on the west side, someplace in the 40s. They weren't letting the night die without a struggle.
Everything is satisfactory, sir?
Sure, except for one thing. I'm lonely. I'd like to have a man-to-man conversation with someone. Someone named Joe Carson, say. Or maybe Mark Wheeler. I'd even talk to Walter Barley.
Very sorry, sir, but I've never heard of...
Ever seen one of these before?
Well...
Pretty shade of green, isn't it? Nice picture of Andrew Jackson on it. Go on. Have a good look.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I will see if one of the gentlemen you mentioned happens to be around.
You do that.
Yes, sir.
Mind if I sit down?
Nope.
How do you like the floor show?
Not bad. One of these nights I'll come back and look at the floor.
That's very funny.
So.
The waiter tells me you wanted words with my partner or me.
The waiter's right.
You wanted those words quite a few bucks worth.
I figured it was the only way I'd get them.
I don't like to see men throw money away. I'm Carson.
Fine. Speaking of floor shows, one of the regular girls is out tonight, isn't she?
Which one?
Well, we never got around to throwing names, but she describes easy. Around 20, redheaded, with a very white skin.
Yeah, now you mention it, she's not working the show tonight.
Too bad. I was looking forward to seeing her.
Well, that can be arranged.
Well, arrange it.
Okay. Only one thing.
Yeah?
She might not be in the right mood. See that door next to the bandstand?
Yeah, I see it.
If she's in the right mood, somebody will open it for you.
Thanks.
Don't mention it.
It took him maybe 5 minutes to find out if the girl was in the right mood. If that's what he was finding out. Either way, at the end of 5 minutes, the door next to the bandstand swung open. Somebody outside the door had done the swinging. I didn't have a chance to see who. I wasn't sure that I was playing it the right way, but I couldn't think of anything else. Nobody paid any attention to me. I crossed to the door and looked through it. The little I could see was a stretch of dirty hallway. But if you're a confidential investigator, you're not too fastidious. I walked through the doorway and shut the door behind me and turned, but not fast enough.
Back to Barrie Craig in just a moment. With the coming of modern transportation and communication, the world has grown smaller. In fact, in some ways, it's too small for comfort. With modern long-range aviation, enemy planes could reach the United States from any part of the world in a matter of hours. A devastating surprise attack could occur at any time. Of course, our nation has taken steps to protect us. There's an extensive radar network to detect the approach of planes. But radar can't do the entire job. That's up to us as individual citizens. Right now, the Air Defense Command needs 300,000 more volunteers for its Ground Observer Corps. This Ground Observer Corps is made up of patriotic citizens who contribute a few hours of their spare time each week. Write or phone your nearest Civil Defense Center or write to Ground Observer Corps, Air Force, Washington 25, D.C. And now, back to William Gargan, starring as Barrie Craig, confidential investigator.
I didn't know how far I'd gone and how long I'd been away, but it took a while coming back. And even then, I didn't try opening my eyes or moving my head. I had a feeling it was going to hurt.
You had him sapped. Why?
Look, Wheeler, he came here asking for us. He fed me a phony routine about a redhead with white skin.
Nina.
Yeah, Nina, being part of the floor show.
I don't care.
You don't know all of it yet. I've been through his pockets. You know who he is?
Look, Carson.
A private eye named Craig. Now, what would you have wanted me to do? Invite him in to go over our books?
That might have been safer than what you did do.
Huh?
I just got a call from one of the newspaper boys down at headquarters. Barrie was brought in a few minutes ago.
Barrie at headquarters?
Wasn't his idea. The department they took him to was the morgue.
I don't believe it. You sure of this?
I'm sure of it.
Well, what's bad with that news?
It ain't no secret he'd come to town to collect. Off us. With him dead, who do you think the cops are going to be looking for?
Maybe I shouldn't have started nothing with this character here, but... Wait a minute. When did Barrie get it?
Around 1.
It's 2 now. If what you're handing me is true, the cops should have already been visiting.
According to what the press was told, Barrie died in an accident.
So what are we worrying about?
The cops have handed out phony releases before.
I don't get it. Either you want to make trouble, or you know better than the press. Where were you around 1 o'clock?
That's a funny question coming from you. What do you care?
Oh, forget it. Maybe I'm getting jumpy, but... How does this guy fit in? And Nina?
Nina ain't been around the club all night, which means she don't fit in. Him? I don't know.
Maybe he heard about Barrie, too.
I've been thinking of that.
Maybe we don't take no chances on... Maybe.
He's out cold. Never know what... Okay, Carson. Get a couple of the boys in.
Now you're talking.
Sure I'm talking, but I could be talking myself into the chair.
So far, I'd been doing fine with my eyes shut. But that wouldn't last much longer. Carson's boys would be glad to shut them again for me if I opened them at the wrong time. so I had to open them at the right time.
Keep an eye on Sonny Boy.
Yeah. Sonny Boy. Pretty soon, no Sonny Boy.
Wheeler was the nervous type, a floor pacer. 7 steps to the door, about turn. 7 steps to the desk, about turn, and the same routine repeated. The time he'd give me a quick look was when he passed me on the way to the door. On the 4th step. The 5th step would have to be my play. It would have to be fast and reasonably quiet. But how fast I could get off the floor, I didn't know. I'd find out. Step to the desk. Turn. Now back. The 5th step. Remember? 2, 3, 4, 5. That's my forearm, locked around your throat. Things you learn in the Army. I increase the pressure an ounce, Wheeler, and that's all. Want a broken neck? That's nice. Now turn the gun around in your hand. Hold it by the barrel. Yeah. Poke it backwards toward me. That's the way. Thanks. Gun butts make a funny sound hitting a man's head. I didn't stop to laugh like mad. Carson and a couple of pals would be dropping in at any minute. There was a window behind the desk. I could have stopped to raise it, but I was in a hurry, and besides, I wasn't anxious to save a penny for the 3 aces, so I went through it fast and wasteful. The alley wasn't any cleaner than the hallway had been, but it was darker, and it didn't lead to a dead end. Ah, Lieutenant Rogers.
What? Oh, hello, Barrie.
I hope I'm not intruding.
That's a nice hope.
I need a little help in a lot of hurry.
Important?
I don't know. It could be.
Even a giraffe couldn't stick out as much neck for you as I do. All right, we're in a hurry with a police escort. To get where?
The 3 aces. One's been trumped, but the game's not over yet.
The men have got their instructions. Front and back of the club's covered. We go in?
If you don't mind.
I don't mind. 3 aces.
Yeah.
Good evening, gent.
Yeah, I'm back again. I brought company with me, though. Lieutenant Rogers, homicide. Save it for your lawyer. Take us to the office.
I will ring.
No. We want a personal guide. That way we can be sure it'll be a surprise.
Move, huh?
Yes, sir.
That quiet authority always gets them.
The badge.
Don't be modest. A couple of square inches of tin isn't that impressive.
I don't know what Mr. Wheeler will...
Nobody passed the law. You have to know anything. Now knock. If a man answers, tell him you're checking the wine list or something.
Yes, sir.
Open the door.
No.
Yeah. I'll explain the reason why to you. If anybody inside has the idea trouble's coming and is preparing to blow down anyone in the doorway, you'll be the one.
I won't.
Sure you will.
All right. Mr. Wheeler.
Move over, Buster.
That's Wheeler?
Yeah. We met earlier. I had the pleasure of knocking him down with the butt of a gun.
He got up?
Yeah.
Sat down behind his desk and proceeded to blow his brains out.
Looks that way. But I'm stupid.
What do you mean?
I don't know why he killed himself.
You'd escaped? He knew you'd come to the police? He was through in the bookie racket?
He still had a skin, his own. Boys like that are very fond of their skin.
It'll be a hard thing to prove anything. Looks like suicide.
Sure. Just like Borley's passing on looked like accident.
It was an accident.
No, Trav. Not an accident at all. The police guard around the club got us nothing but a handful of small crooks. Carson was conspicuously among those missing. We asked lots of people for his home address, and lots of people didn't know it.
We got the whole department on it, Barrie. They'll turn him up.
Maybe, maybe not.
He couldn't have made it out of the city.
He didn't have to.
Meaning?
The setup back at the club goes for suicide. You'll never be able to prove otherwise. As for the accident...
That you call murder.
There's only one way you can tie him to it. The girl.
We did dig up a name for her. Nina West.
Pretty name. A pretty girl. And right now, very possibly a dead girl.
Oh, you can't be sure.
Put yourself in Carson's place. She's the one who can send him to the chair. With her dead, you've got nothing. Not even... And get this, Trav, not even a motive that would stand up in court for his killing her. I went out and took a look at what had happened to the night. The sky was getting lighter. The winter sun would be sneaking over the tops of the buildings in an hour or two. Not handing out much warmth, but a promise anyway. I started walking. I didn't try to think, because the only thoughts I had on tap weren't very pleasant. Nina West wasn't the kind of girl your mother hoped you'd marry, but she was young, pretty. I didn't think she'd known what was going to happen to her date. If she'd lived, maybe someday she'd have walked into my office in the old building on Madison Avenue and asked me to find a lost dog for her, and suddenly walking wasn't fast enough for me. I needed a cab fast. I needed to go someplace fast. Only a hunch, but it was the one chance we had, the one chance Nina West had. If she'd gone where I had to get to within minutes, my office. Hang around, I might need you. I didn't bother with the elevator. I used the stairs. They're faster. It sounded good to me, the hunch. Say the girl hadn't known what Carson was letting her in for. She found out late. Barrie already dead. I slowed down, heading down the hallway to the office. It might be smarter not to announce an arrival. She'd have realized she was in trouble. Gone home? No. Carson knew where that was. But I'd barged into the club. Carson was busy with me. She might have heard him use my name. Maybe. Maybe she'd think of my office. Because a girl like that wouldn't go to the police. The lights were on in the office. I hadn't left them on. Someone was inside. Someone or a couple of someones. Had Carson tried her home, found her out, tried half a dozen other places she might have gone that he knew of, and then wound up with the same conclusion I had? There was no way to play it fancy, which was just as well. I'm not the fancy type. I hit the door hard and went to the floor. She screamed, but the shots drowned her out. I wound up against the desk, Carson to one side of me. The girl cut between us and got the bullet Carson had meant for me. He didn't have another try.
No, don't!
The gun.
I'll drop it, see?
Thanks. The rest is going to be for the fun of it. It didn't last very long. He dropped his hands. You can't hit even a Carson with his hands down unless you're a Carson yourself. I didn't qualify.
We got a deposition from her before she went into surgery. Carson's all washed up, Barrie, but the kid's got a good chance.
Fine.
He had it laid out beautifully. Nina was told of Barrie take her home to the building where you saw them. For a gag, Carson told her. Carson broke into the building through the back door and was waiting in the lobby with the inside door propped open. He slugged Barrie across the back of the head hard enough to break the skull, pushed him backwards. Then he and the girl scrammed through the back door. The perfect murder. Except for what, Barrie?
The ashes on the sidewalk, for one thing. Barrie couldn't have slipped on the ice. The other thing? The girl got into the building only one way. Somebody had to be waiting there to let her in. That made the word accident smell.
Let's go home, huh?
Sure. Hey, look, came the dawn.
You've been listening to William Gargan in another exciting transcribed mystery drama from the adventures of Barrie Craig, confidential investigator. Tonight's story, The Girl on the Doorstep, was written by Lou Vettis. Next week, it's the strange story titled Plotters Beware, about which Barrie Craig has this to say.
Next week, an underworld king tries to deal yours truly the ace of spades. Only thing, the gravedigger digs a hole measured to fit himself. Good night, folks. See you next week.
Bromo Seltzer, famous for fast relief of headache and upset stomach, and the National Broadcasting Company have brought you Barrie Craig, confidential investigator, starring William Gargan. Carl Caruso speaking.
Tonight, enjoy Meet the Press on NBC.
Welcome back. Another great episode of Barrie Craig in the books. We're going to turn quickly to some listener comments. Comment from Podcast Alley. Trust me, take the time to listen. You will not regret it. Best podcast out there. And then we have this comment off of iTunes. Love the podcast. Well, thank you so much for your kind remarks. I should mention the titles of the episodes in between last week and this one. But we had on January 11th, The Vanished Lady, then Money to Burn, The Lady is a Liar, The Corpse Wouldn't Talk, and Non-Incident. Well, there's actually only one lost episode between this week's episode and the next one we have available. So join us next week for another episode of Barrie Craig, Confidential Investigator. In the meanwhile, send your comments to box 13 at greatdetectives.net. Email us and give us a call, 208-991-4783. Remember the old-time Dragnet podcast? We do one episode of Dragnet per week, posted every Saturday over at radiodragnet.com. And then be sure and check out the old-time radio Superman show available at laserandsword.com. Well, this episode is brought to you by the financial support of our listeners. Thank you so much for your support. And we continue with Candy Matson. Candy Matson starred Natalie Masters in the lead role. She and her husband collaborated on a wide variety of projects that were broadcast on San Francisco radio, including the Mad Masters, as well as appearances on the Spotlight Playhouse. Outside of Candy Matson, she made her mark as a character actress on television, first appearing in Dragnet in 1954, and continuing to have a very long, successful career in TV and movies until her death in the 1980s. Her husband, Monty, the creator of the show and its director, died at age 57 due to problems associated with his alcoholism. But this is both of the Masters at their very best. So we're going to take a listen. This is the second episode of Candy Matson. It's from July 7th of 1949. The broadcast version of the Donna Dunham case aired as the show's premiere, and this is the second attempt, so let's go ahead and take a listen.
Hello, Yukon 28209. Yes, this is Candy Matson.
Do you have a little unsolved murder in your home? Got some blackmail you want to unload? Are you the victim of some vulgar extortionist? I know a girl you should meet. She may not be the greatest private eye in the world, so what if it does cost you $300 or $400? She sure is sweet. She's Candy Matson. Like to meet her?
Hello.
Candy Matson?
Well, I wasn't sure when I looked in the mirror this morning.
Had a rough night, eh?
Oh, there have been rougher ones. Look, Voice, before you get caught with my receiver down, who are you and what do you want?
As to who I am, you'll find out very shortly. What I want is you.
How romantic, and over the phone yet.
Let me finish. What I want is you to lay off that cable car business.
Oh, that. Well, I'm afraid I can't. You see, I was sitting beside him when they discovered his transfer had been punched sort of permanently. That's how things happen with me. I get into the craziest routines. You see, I used to be a model. I've been told I have the proper displacement for such a career. But I found there wasn't enough money in it. A girl has to maintain a nice apartment on Telegraph Hill, keep enough clothes to highlight the displacement I mentioned, and also eat, doesn't she? Sure. So I turned private eye. You meet a better class of people, mostly named Rigger or Mortis. Now take this cable car deal. It's positively fantastic. But after all, this is radio, isn't it? Like to hear how the whole thing happened? Leave us trip along to Act 1. I wanted to get downtown that morning, but I couldn't take the F car on Stockton. They were ripping up about 87 streets, which is par for the course. So I walked down Telegraph Hill and up to Mason. That's where the Bay and Powell cable car stopped.
All aboard! Come on, Lana, show that shapely ankle. We gotta make the Fairmont by Whitsuntide.
The car was loaded, and so was the character next to me. I tried to budge into the seat between him and a Fisherman's Wharf dowager, but I couldn't quite make it. I'd forgotten my shoehorn. Say, pardon me, but would you mind reading your Wall Street Journal over that-a-way a bit? I'd like to sit in here.
Oh, if you insist.
A knight of old. He budged his hips a quarter of an inch, and I slipped in, ready for my rocket ride over the hill and down into town. The trip, as usual, was uneventful. 3 smashed fenders and several choice words I'd never heard before, but I wrote them down. By the time our prairie schooner reached the turntable at Market Street, the crowd on the car had thinned out. But Buster was still beside me, his head buried in common and preferred.
Market Street.
I started to get down.
Hey, lady, take your boyfriend with you. We're heading back up the hill.
Boyfriend? I'll sue. He looks like the advance man for Lewis and Clark.
How do you like that? He fell asleep over his stocks and bonds.
I looked again. Hipsy wasn't asleep. Hipsy was stone cold dead on Market. What a twist. I, who always went on the prowl for a whodunit, get one literally tossed into my lap. He just hadn't gone out of this world serene-like. Oh, no. There was a steady slurp of blood trickling down his vest just north by northeast of the equator. After a half-hour wait full of questioning by homicide legmen, I knew my morning shopping tour was rained out. And after all, I was only going to buy an emerald clip to match the glint in my eye. Well, that would have to wait. I knew the next step. I grabbed a cab home. I wasn't long in waiting. Right on cue. And if it was the right cue, it would be Lieutenant Ray Mallard from headquarters, daintily pressing his cuticles against my apartment buzzer. I was right.
What?
I've been expecting you. Come on in, Mallard.
You've been expecting me. Why, Candy?
Naive little rover boy, you. Have a drink?
No, I'm not in the mood. Just make it a double.
Sit down, Mallard. Let's be civilized. Take off your hat.
It is off.
Oh?
Candy, for once I'm puzzled.
You're just saying that.
Yeah, because it's true. I've checked and rechecked. No matter how many loose ends I tie together, I still get no connection between you and Dwight Ellsworth.
Dwight who'sworth?
Ellsworth. Your extremely limp traveling companion on the cable this morning?
Mallard, I can give you an angle on that.
Yeah?
Yeah. The angle being that I didn't know him from Adam.
Level?
Straight. Oh, look, honeypot, this mediocre dialogue is getting us nowhere. What did you haul your size 11s in here for?
Oh, frankly, I don't know. Here, fill it up, will you?
Well, you're not just going around in circles, Mallard. You're going around in doubles.
Yeah. Like I've said before, Candy, you've got a pretty view from here.
Oh? Wait till I turn around.
I mean from your window. Look at that ship down there, just docking.
Where?
Down there. There's romance for you. Probably just in from the Far East.
Here's your drink.
Oh, thanks.
You know, it is sort of romantic. Don't you think it'd be fun to jump on a tramp like that and whisk off to the South Seas?
Hmm?
On a honeymoon?
No.
That's what I thought. South Seas. Mallard.
Don't call me Mallard.
Why not? We're just playing for ducks, aren't we?
Ah, very crisp. Playing for ducks. No, Candy, we aren't. Not in this case. We've got a dead man in our hands. Rudy Toot Toot shot right through the heart. And you were sitting next to him.
Sure. Go on now. Get out of here.
What?
You heard me. Lift your hindquarters and get back to headquarters.
Candy, I don't like that look. You've got something on your mind.
Yeah, but you wouldn't recognize it if I told you about it.
One word of warning. Don't dabble. You're in deep enough. Got it?
Got it. Here's your hat. Grab it. So long, Mallard. See you around a jailhouse sometime. Fi-fo-fum. 'Twas then I smelled a big fat fee. That great, big, kind of attractive Mallard. He missed the boat. Oh, he saw it, but he missed it. It was that ship he saw docking. That was the first time I came out of the dark since my Tunerville ride down the hill in the morning. I needed help, so I called an old friend of mine, if you can call that help. Rembrandt Watson was his name. He was a photographer and other things. He spent most of his life in the darkroom dabbling with bottles. His negatives and prints were sharp. His thought processes, not quite. But he'd given me assistance in the past, so I called him.
Rembrandt Watson speaking. Photography, portraits, and camera work.
Yes, Rembrandt, I know.
Also available for gardening, janitorial service, and babysitting.
Rembrandt, it's Candy.
Especially if they're over 21. Who? Candy?
Now you're tuned in.
How dare you, baggage. I was experimenting with a new type of formula.
90 proof for 100.
100. And Candy, it works beautifully. There's a delightful little pixie in a pink ballet skirt in my living room.
Well, leave her there and get over here immediately to my place. Take a cab. I'll pay for it.
I'd much rather have a handsome carriage with a brace of chestnuts.
You've got 'em in your head. Now just do as I say and get over here. Float in, Rembrandt.
Gadfrey. Where's the man to take me cloak, gloves, and topper?
You're wearing a sport coat and slacks, and you know I have no man.
And therein lies your basic trouble, my dear. You have no man.
Now, Rembrandt.
Every man should have a woman. Every woman should have a man. It's the incontrovertible law of the universe. Candy, you should have a man.
You?
Sure. I'm no longer a man. I'm a sprite transcending the world.
Well, stop transcending a moment and come down to earth. We've got a job to do.
How poetic. How idyllic. We've got a job to do. For money?
Eventually.
Oh, one of those. Very well, my dear. Bring me up to date.
Well, I don't really know if I can or not.
Good. Then I shall leave and return to me formula.
Oh, no. What I mean is, the whole story is so fantastic you'd never believe it.
I might. Try me, Candy.
Well, I get on a cable car and sit next to a character reading the Wall Street Journal.
A strange coupling. A cable car and the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah. And when we get to the end of the line, my friend next to me is dead.
Probably the ride down the hill frightened him to death.
Uh-uh. He looked like a used punch board. He had a neat little bullet hole through his heart.
Candy, my little ballerina friend in the pink skirt is more believable than what you just told me.
I told you it was fantastic, but none know how it happened. Now, sooner or later, Mallard is going to come out of his fog. And when he does, I'm going to be out of a fee.
A fee that so far doesn't exist, my pretty.
It will, if my hunch is right. Now, here's what I want you to do. Go down to the Chronicle and get all the back files you can on Southern Islands Steamship Company.
The Chronicle? A pleasure. I have a few questionable companions there who indulge in formulas.
Stay away from those companions and just do as I ask.
Very well, my dove. I go, but entirely against my will. And where will you be?
Around town, Rembrandt. I've got to do some legwork.
Let me assure you, Candy, you have just the right equipment for it, too.
What a joint. I'll bet they mount slit gullets on the walls instead of deer heads. Well, come on, Candy. Get your tools out and screw up your courage.
Yeah, miss. What'll it be?
Nothing right at the moment except information.
Information, water, both free. What do you want to know?
Well, I'm looking for the purser off the Dwightsonia. I hear he does his shore duty in here.
That's right. Name Campbell. That head on the table over there belongs to him.
Thanks. Hello, sailor. Hey, Campbell. Wake up.
Leave me alone.
Come on, snap out of it.
Who are you? What do you want?
My name is Candy Matson. I want to ask a question.
I'm only drinking. Go away.
Not until I find out what I want to know. Dwight Ellsworth was murdered this morning.
What?
I thought that would bring you to.
Well, that's the nicest news I've heard since VJ Day. What do you want to know?
Where does his brother live?
That stooge. He's got about as much spine as a water eel.
Never mind. I want to find him. He seems to keep his whereabouts as secret as an atomic stockpile.
The whole family ought to be knocked off. He lives out in Seacliff, 25 Dashel Road.
Good. Bartender, buy my friend a little reward. And one for yourself, too. Well, so far, so good. Oh, how did I know about Campbell, the purser? Well, you see, I have quite a few friends, most of whom my pal Mallard doesn't approve. So I grabbed a cab and navigated the driver out toward Seacliff. It was so foggy I couldn't see the meter. But I paid him anyway, gave him a neutral tip, and dismissed him. There it was, 25 Dashel Road. An austere-looking cabana, one that dared you to ring the front doorbell. I dared. I had the awful feeling I should have been around at the side door delivering hand laundries.
Good evening.
Except for the fog, yes. Is Mr. Ellsworth in?
Yes, he is. But I'm afraid I must ask you to leave. There's been a death in the family.
I know. That's why I'm here.
Come in, please.
Thank you.
Walk this way, please.
Oh, I'm afraid I couldn't, even if I lived to be 100.
Mind your tongue, young lady. You're in the house of an Ellsworth.
Oh, hoity-toity. The old babe had delusions of grandeur. Well, no need to get uppity with me. I've mingled with royalty. I once played a bit part in a Rita Hayworth picture. But this old gal was really something. She couldn't have been more than 45, yet looked like something out of the Barretts of Wimpole Street. She ushered me into a large-ceilinged living room, and there on the divan was my boy, his head lowered into his hands and quite obviously touched. Quite obviously.
Roger, this young lady is here to see you. I don't believe you mentioned your name.
Candy Matson.
Matson? You in shipping, too?
Of a sort.
Oh, this is my wife, Miss Matson. You'll pardon me if I don't seem hospitable, but my brother was murdered this morning.
I know. I was sitting next to him when it happened.
You were?
Don't talk to her, Roger. I don't trust her. This whole thing is a threat of some kind.
No, it's not a threat. It's a business proposition. I'll come right to the point. You see, I'm a private detective.
Oh, one of those persons.
Put your nose back down, Mrs. Ellsworth. I want to get the show on the road. Yes, I'm a private detective, and I'm in a spot, too. The police think I'm connected with the case in some way, so I'm here for a double purpose.
I'm listening, Miss Matson.
Roger, I forbid you to speak with this woman.
Too late, Mrs. Ellsworth. Now, this is it. I'm in this business to make money. Give me a check now for $300, and I'll find out who killed your brother. And I'll also clear myself.
Roger, I'm warning you.
Naturally, you want to see the killer of your brother brought to justice, don't you, Mr. Ellsworth? Don't you?
Yes. Here, I'll make a check out right now.
Thank you. Just make it out to Candy Matson. Payable today. A lovely collection of guns you have, Mr. Ellsworth. You hunt much?
Oh, yes. My wife and I are quite fond of shooting. She's an excellent shot. There you are.
Thank you. I'll be in touch with you sometime tomorrow. Mr. Reed didn't say a word. She just stood there against the fireplace and shot sparks through me. After I waved the check in the air a few times to dry the ink, she showed me to the door.
Very clever, aren't you? Taking advantage of a weak-willed man.
I wonder who made him that way.
Don't cash that check. I mean it. Don't cash that check.
Mrs. Ellsworth, $300. I need the money, badly. I need some new rolls for my player piano. I buzzed back downtown. I wanted to cash that check in a hurry. I knew of only one person who would give me the crisp green at that hour of the night. Uncle Charlie, the honest miller who ran the chase room. Uncle Charlie, in the strict sense of the word, was a gentleman. So with a tender little pat on my cheek, he cashed the check, and I went up Telegraph Hill and home. All of a sudden, my eyes did a couple of inverted loops. Oh, my lights were on. Who's in here? All right, speak up.
Oh, Candy, the light of my life. Come join our party.
Oh, Rembrandt, you gave me a scare.
You don't scare easy either, Candy. Got something on your mind?
And Mallard. Well, how ducky, a midnight soiree. What goes on here?
Well, that chicken you had in the icebox is delicious.
Was delicious. Looks like you've done everything but eat the bone.
Your vintage is superb, too, Candy. Have a little formula?
No. Now, come on, what gives?
That's my line, Candy. What gives? You're in on something, and I want to know about it.
Oh, Mallard, believe me, it's nothing. I'm just trying to parlay a couple of hunches.
Tall hunches. Look at all those clippings on the South Sea Island Steamship Company. What are they for?
I meant to tell you, Candy, I had remarkable success down at the Chronicle. There's everything you want on that steamship line.
Oh, Rembrandt, did you have to tell the whole world?
Candy, you chide me unnecessarily. I merely had the clippings on the table when Hawkshaw here walks in on me.
Okay, Candy, take it from there.
I can't tell you yet, Mallard. Nothing makes sense yet. I've got about 4 loose ends that need tying off.
If I'd only put 2 men to following you, I'd save myself a lot of grief.
2 days, that's all, Mallard. Just give me 2 days. I think I'll have it for you.
All right. But don't forget, the boys down at Kearney Street headquarters don't love you the way I do. 2 days. No more or less. I gotta go. Thanks for the fowl, chicken.
Very gay. Here, Rembrandt, here's $50 for you.
50? My word. What's all this talk about a recession?
Go on and take it. Go someplace and stabilize the economy. I whipped through the old newspaper clipping. It was all there. Fire at sea on Ellsworth ship. 2 seamen lost off Ellsworth ship near Honolulu. South Sea Island line ship loses rudder in storm. On and on it went over a period of 3 years. I threw the papers back on the table. Helped myself to some of Rembrandt's formula. Turned down the lights and went out on the porch. The bay was dark except for an occasional path of light from a passing freighter. I sat down to think and think. Then, click, just like that, 2 little tumblers in my mind fell into place. Only one thing to do, and that was to do it the hard way. The next morning, just as the ferry building siren was announcing 8 o'clock to downtown San Francisco, I got Rembrandt on the phone.
Candy, what on earth are you calling me for at this hour?
Can't help it. There's work to be done.
I did my work last night so extremely well that I'm just going to bed now.
Sorry, you'll just have to delay your sack time. Meet me at the corner of Mason and Union in 10 minutes, right where the cable car stops.
Now, what are we going to do?
We're going to take a cable car ride.
What? One of those bouncing, jerky little contraptions? Not the way I feel this morning.
Oh, yes, you are. Union and Mason in 10 minutes. All right, Rembrandt, get on.
This is the silliest thing you've ever done, Candy.
Maybe. We'll see. Dwight Ellsworth was already on the car when I got on here. And alive.
How could you tell?
He mumbled something when I asked him to move over.
Sounds logical. Although I once remember stumbling into a corpse who mumbled for hours after it had been liquidated.
Rembrandt was in one of his rambling moods, so I let him alone. The car pulled over Mason Street, down Washington, and then swung on to Powell and up the hill. Now I watched the buildings and apartments carefully. There was a little red brick building, now a big apartment house, a woman's residence club, and so on. Then over the hill, more apartments, and the possibilities petered out at Bush. Well, only one thing to do. Canvass all those blocks between Washington and Bush. Okay, Rembrandt. Off the car.
Strangest corpse I ever did see. What'd you say, Candy?
Off the car. Come on.
Now what? I just want to get to bed.
Well, not for a long time, Boy Blue. Now, here's the pitch. You take this building, and I'll take the next. We'll alternate as we go along. Ask if a tall woman with a horsey face and dressed something like Queen Victoria ever lived around here.
Oh, Candy.
I know it sounds wild, but it's got to be done.
A horse with a tall face and dressed something like...
Oh, Rembrandt, look at me. Get that smoke out of your brain. A tall woman with a horsey face and dressed something like Queen Victoria. You got it?
Got it.
Okay, get going. It was slow and tiresome. And the answers I got.
A tall gal dressed like Queen Victoria. Oh, sister!
That was about par.
Nope, nobody like that ever lived here.
Are you positive?
A dame who fits that description? Yeah, I'm positive.
The morning wore on, and so did we. We were over on the other side of California Street now, so we stopped and had a bite to eat. I had pickles with mine, and Rembrandt had olives on toothpicks in a glass. And again, we picked up the hunt. My heart was suddenly making with a Roomba. There, just on the other side of Clay, in front of a 3-story red brick house, was a police squad car. There was a little knot of people gathered around. Daintily lifting my crinoline, I did a Mel Patton down the block and up the front steps. I didn't have any trouble finding the room. The door was wide open, and there was a body on the floor. 4 representatives of the law were buzzing back and forth. One of the buzzees was Mallard.
Well, my little ambassador of violence. Why is it you're always around the extremely dead, Candy?
I've got no time to brandy the ad-libs, Mallard. Who is it?
I don't know yet. No identification.
Let me see.
Ah, a pen pal, maybe.
I was right. I knew it.
Knew it? Knew what?
You're right, he was a pen pal. He wrote me a check last night for $300. His name is Roger Ellsworth.
Very interesting. Must be open season on Ellsworth. Okay, Candy. Time you filled in the blanks. Start.
Wait a minute. I want to look at the window over here. Mm-hmm. Mallard, there are a couple of younger Ellsworths living around town here. I'm sure you'd like to see them stay healthy.
Yeah?
Get out to 25 Dashiell Road and pick up an old crone also named Ellsworth. 5 will get you 20. She's the one you're after.
All right. But you get back to your place and stay put, understand? I want to have a more illuminating chat with you.
Oh, Mallard, I'm just like putty in your hands. The moon was coming up over Diablo and spraying a path of silver on the bay. Still no Mallards. I wondered what could be wrong. Well, this was it. This was the showdown.
You seen a tall face with a horsey woman?
Oh, Rembrandt.
Candy, I'm so mad at you I could... Oh, what's the use?
Now what's the matter?
What's the matter, she says. I've been roving all over Powell Street ringing doorbells. Where did you go, you traitor?
Oh, Rembrandt, I'm sorry. And in the excitement, I forgot all about you.
What excitement?
There's been another murder.
In a moment, there's going to be another. I'm looking right at you, Candy.
Oh, cool off. Have some formula and stop snorting steam. What was that?
Your window, Candy. It just shattered.
What? Oh, wait a minute. That window didn't shatter by itself. Quick, get the lights, Rembrandt. Now duck down here.
What sort of a silly game are we playing now?
This isn't a game, believe me.
Candy! Candy, are you all right?
Yikes, it's the gumshoe.
Yes, I'm all right. Where are you, Mallard?
Over here, 2 houses over. We've got your girlfriend trapped on the roof next to you. Don't move and stay covered.
Okay.
All right, Mrs. Ellsworth. Are you coming down peacefully, or do we have to play cops and robbers?
I'm not coming down until I get that Candy Matson. She did it. She forced me to kill my own brother-in-law.
Have it your own way. Okay, loosen her up a bit, boys.
Better than the 4th of July.
Keep your head down, Rembrandt.
Oh, is that what was up?
Ready to come down, Mrs. Ellsworth?
No, I'm not. That hateful woman. She's ruined my whole life. All my plans. Just because of her snooping and prying. She's going to die, I tell you.
It was a miracle, Candy. You must have moved slightly just as she shot at you.
Well, it was too close, I can tell you. She's dead?
Oh, decidedly. I think she was dead before she hit the ground. That one shot got her. We went out to her house, and she was just driving off when we got there. We trailed her up to North Beach, lost her for a block, and then spotted her car at the top of the hill here. We arrived just as she was getting on the roof next door. Okay, now you tell me your little dream.
Well, it was that ship docking that set my wheels going around. The name Ellsworth started burning in back somewhere. You saw the clippings we dug up.
Yeah.
The South Sea Island steamship lines were slowly being sabotaged. I did some checking, and I found that the insurance companies weren't going to renew.
Yeah. I don't know why I didn't tie that in sooner.
Oh, it's just that you have too many things on your mind, Mallard, dear. I went out to the place on Dashiell Road, and when I left, I was pretty sure the old girl had knocked off her brother-in-law.
Why?
Well, for several reasons. One, she was a venomous old witch. Two, you've never seen such a collection of guns in all your life. And her husband admitted she was a darn good shot. I also saw one little pot gun that was very interesting. It had a silencer on it.
Uh-huh. That was the one she used on you tonight.
And also the one she used on Dwight Ellsworth from the window of that apartment where you found her husband.
How do you know?
Go back there. You'll see a nice little bullet hole in the curtain with burned powder all around it.
Now, don't tell me that...
Yes, I'm telling you that she rented that place knowing that her brother-in-law always went downtown on a certain cable car. She waited that morning until we were riding by, and she plunked him.
I have now heard everything.
And the reason? Dwight Ellsworth, rather than fighting the insurance companies, had decided to sell his steamship line. But the old gal thought she'd beat him to the punch by knocking him off. The steamship company would then fall into her husband's hands.
Yeah. What about her husband?
Well, after he gave me the check and I left, they evidently had a fearful row, and she spilled the beans. Somehow she lured him down to that place on Powell and gave him some lead poisoning, too. And that's all there is to it.
Candy, I wish you'd have told me all these things earlier. We might have been able to save the life of Roger Ellsworth.
It wouldn't do any good. Because if she hadn't killed him, I was going to.
What?
Mm-hmm. While I was waiting for you to get here, the phone rang. It was Uncle Charlie, the honest miller. That no-good Roger Ellsworth. His check bounced like a brand-new golf ball. What's so funny, Mallard?
Listen in again to the further adventures of Candy Matson, Girl Sucker.
Well, that's the way it goes. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. In this case, nobody did, except Rembrandt. He'd stocked his darkroom with $50 worth of formula, and not the kind you use on negatives either. Let's see. Murder on a cable car, Dwight and Roger Ellsworth done in as well as the old gal. One check that bounced. It really does sound fantastic, doesn't it? But I told you this was radio, didn't I? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I did come out ahead at that. On the way out, Mallard leaned down and kissed me. The first time it ever happened. You know, at times it's kind of fun to be in the arms of the law.
Listen again next week at the same time. For excitement and adventure, just dial...
Candy Matson, Yukon 28209.
Heard tonight were Helen Cleve, Jack Cahill, and Harry Bechtel, Jack Thomas as Rembrandt, and Henry Leff as Mallard. The program stars Natalie Masters as Candy and is written and produced by Monty Masters. This has been a presentation of NBC, the National Broadcasting Company.
Welcome back. The rubber check. The one way to sabotage Candy's pay-in-advance strategy. The reference in the story to the Barretts of Wimpole Street was actually in reference to a famous play which told the love story of Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And Elizabeth Barrett Browning had to deal with a domineering father that pretty much controlled the lives of all of his kids. This sort of harsh atmosphere. Now we turn to listener comments and feedback. William says, I'm contributing again as I promised to do on a regular basis. This contribution is in honor of Candy Matson. She is definitely one of my favorite OTR detectives. What is not to like about a beautiful blonde sleuth? Indeed, thanks so much for your support, William. Then we have a comment posted on the blog from John. We just moved to a beautiful Pacific Beach community in Santa Elena, Ecuador. Enjoy the shows. You come in loud and clear on my iPad. Temperatures are 70 on its way up to 80. seasons are reversed since we are south of the equator. Well, thanks so much for the comment, John. I've often thought it would be nice to live south of the equator for half the year. So I hope you enjoy your new home there, and thanks so much for listening to us over there in Ecuador. All right, well, that will do it for today's episode. We will be back tomorrow with Let George Do It, and then be sure to join us next week for another episode of Candy Matson. Well, this episode of The Great Detectives of Old Time Radio is brought to you by the wonderful financial support of our listeners. Thank you so much. Today's episode of Let George Do It is called The Voice of the Giant.
Personal notice, changes my stock and trade. If the job's too tough for you to handle, you got a job for me, George Valentine. Write full details.
Standard Oil Company of California, on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West, invites you to Let George Do It. The Voice of the Giant. A transcribed adventure of George Valentine.
And so, from hour to hour, we write and write. And then from hour to hour, we rot and rot. And thereby hangs a tale. Right together tonight, aren't you? 8 o'clock. The giant and the midget. And don't worry over there. I'll wind you. I'll wind all of you. And the fat duchess, too, in the next room. It's her turn tonight. Oh, did I? Yes, of course, already, didn't I? Time is money. Time goes, you say. Ah, no. Alas, time stays, we go. Oh, it's silly, silly. Death chooses his own time. Listen, it's not running. The Duchess. Oh, no. I can't hear. It stopped. She stopped. She stopped.
Well, Charlotte, what is the matter with you?
Oh, goodbye.
You come galloping like...
Be quiet. Oh. He's running again.
Did you think the Duchess would stop? Oh, no. No. She is not one of those English clocks with the foolish quotations. Time is this, time
This is my father's collection, not yours. This is my father's workroom, not yours. You go to your own cottage. Why don't you stay over where you belong?
I go where I like. The clock should be mine, every one.
Get out of here. Get out. Oh. I'm sorry, Uncle Charles.
Middle-aged lady with a heart like a lemon, like her face. I don't touch anything. I don't stop anything. What do you think happened? What do you think to be afraid of?
Thank you for the compliment. I'm going to lock up, go back to the main house.
I only come here to look for you, son. Such a beautiful night. And you should fix your hair. He is come.
What?
The young man I see you with several times, weekends ago.
Walter?
Yeah, him. Walter Stanton. He's out by the garden to see you. Well, he has brought friends. You'll have amusement and maybe go out someplace. A young lady and a man.
What's that?
Very nice. Very nice. He's brought a man for you to meet. His name is Valentine. His name is George Valentine.
No, I'm sorry, Walter. Tell your friends I'm sorry.
But we drove all the way out from town, Charlotte.
Please, I don't feel well. I have a headache.
I haven't seen you for 2 weeks since you left.
I'll write again, but I'm going inside.
Charlotte, we really wanted to see your father, not you. Look, I'm George Valentine. I wanted to meet your father.
I'll write you. I'm going into the...
Charlotte, what's the matter? What are you listening for? What is it? Charlotte!
you're there, aren't you? Tick, tick, boom, boom. Tick, tick, boom, boom. I didn't mean to leave you so long. I can hear your voice. You're all right, aren't you? The voice, Charlotte? So that's Charlotte.
Yes, Miss Brooks. Charlotte there. She's my wife.
What?
What?
Well, yes, I know. I told you I'd seen her only a few times, but 3 weeks
Dear
ago...
Mr. Valentine, would you please come for a drive to the country with me this evening? There is someone I want you to meet. That was your letter. That's all you've told us.
Yeah, Mr. Stanton. I'd be happier with some facts.
Well, I'm a teacher, college in the city, summer section now. Been carrying a very heavy load, but on weekends I've managed to get out a bit to paint. It's a hobby. I'm not much good. Well, quite by accident, the start of the summer, I happened to stop off at a little train station down the road here, and I met Charlotte that same day. I was painting a cow, as a matter of fact.
Well, that could be a romantic situation.
It wasn't exactly. Well, you can see what I'm like. Maybe not the ordinary ardent lover, but to me, Charlotte is the most beautiful person in the world.
I understand.
I know that possibly to anyone else.
Charlotte lives out here taking care of her father, is that right?
Yes, I told you that. She loves her father very much. She always has. She's devoted her entire life to him.
He's a watch manufacturer, isn't he?
Well, he's retired now. Been an invalid ever since she's been grown. A bad heart or something. Has to just stay in his room up there on the second floor. Can't even come out to wind the clocks in his workshop anymore.
And this uncle of hers, this Tile...
Tile Saxeborg? He's a second cousin, really, or something. Helped her father get started in the old days, I guess. A master mechanic. They don't get along very well.
But he's the only other person around. Doesn't sound like much of a life for Charlotte.
I came up every weekend. I know she enjoyed seeing me, too. I rented a room at a farm the last few times. It wasn't convenient for me here, apparently. Well, to make a long story short, I asked Charlotte to marry me 3 weeks ago. I had no idea what she'd say. We'd never been together for long. She never liked to leave the house for more than an hour or so at a time.
But she said yes, didn't she?
Well, she just cried. I've got a license, like an optimist. The next weekend, I was delayed. Took a much later train. She'd been waiting for me 3 hours. But the minute I got there, she took me a couple of miles farther on to a neighbor's place. Justice of the peace was waiting for us.
Well, congratulations. Only I don't understand.
It was the only full, complete afternoon we ever had together. I had to catch the night train back. 2 solid weeks of final examinations coming up. And every day I wrote a letter, and she didn't.
Go on.
I mean, she didn't answer mine. I tried to telephone a couple of times, and I wired. And then I got this.
Here, let's see. Letter?
Just these few words.
Yeah, here's it. Dear Mr. Stanton, I must tell you to stop trying to reach me, trying to see me. My lawyers will contact you shortly regarding our annulment. Sincerely, Charlotte.
Annulment?
I know there was a lot for us both to overcome. We're both shy sort of people. We're not young, but...
Maybe you are not so much of a man, Walter.
Hello, Mr. Saxeborg.
I will not excuse myself for listening. The night is as much mine as yours.
Yes, but what did you mean by
You are too considerate for what you should have. What is yours?
But her father is ill. I didn't
The
want...
nasty situation is no place for a gentleman. If you had asked some more questions, be rude, snoop to find out things.
Okay.
Then you would know that her father is dead.
What did you say?
He died of a heart attack 2 weeks ago. The day of your wedding.
Strikes like that 5 minutes before the hour, before the biggest bell rings.
The tower clock? Yes, I've heard him like that. But look here, Charlotte, the reason I broke in here to talk to you...
The giant. That's its name. The giant from Zurich. My father brought it all the way over here. The tower had to be specially built. A staircase goes up 3 flights from the land.
Sure. Must be quite a job to wind, but...
The biggest bell is 9 feet across.
I want to know why you won't talk to Walter down there.
A crew of men comes once a month to reset the machine.
Charlotte, I said I want to know why you...
I'm sorry, Mr. Valentine. Just don't talk so loud, please. I'm trying to listen.
Oh. I understand the giant hasn't stopped running for 300 years. Your uncle tells me your father was very proud of his collection. Great believer in time is money, time is this, time is that, time is everything.
Walter's in the house, too, isn't he?
Yeah. Now, look, Charlotte, all I want to know is...
Where?
Well, in the study, but it's not important. It's you that
My uncle is an avaricious fool, Mr. Valentine. If you don't mind, I think we'd better...
Mr. Valentine!
He was looking in the desk, your father's desk. I only stepped out for a minute and...
I was not... Go with me, I didn't touch a thing.
Cut it out.
There he keeps all his papers. He was reading the letter.
I wasn't doing anything of the...
Well, that's better.
What in the world is the matter with you? You told me to snoop around, didn't you?
Prying into the things that are mine when Charlotte is what you are here for. To take her away, to make her happy, to get her...
Oh, stop it, all of you.
Charlotte.
I don't want either one of you in this house.
Now, young lady, you listen to me.
It's my house. That's all. And I don't intend to leave. Not ever. And there's nothing in that desk to pry into. No secret anywhere but in me.
Charlotte, please.
I'm the one, and I don't want you, Walter. You can't help me any of you. It's in me. I'm the one who left her. Not you and not Kyle.
You did what? Left whom?
I left him. I killed him.
Wait a minute, Charlotte. As I understand it, I understood your father died of a heart attack. Sure. The giant. That's what you listen to all the time, isn't it? Only somehow you're afraid of...
It stopped, Mr. Valentine.
Huh?
I left him all day and it stopped. And I wasn't here to fix it. The giant stopped. The voice of the giant. And I wasn't there. So you see, I killed my father.
Charlotte, wait! Charlotte!
And when the giant stops again, I will die.
We'll return to tonight's adventure of George Valentine in just a moment. When you're driving through hot desert country, 120 degrees in the shade may seem cool to you, but what happens to your car's engine when you're in that kind of country? The fact is, the engine gets even hotter when you stop, and internal engine parts get so hot that ordinary motor oils run away from them. But not RPM motor oil. It's compounded to cling to overheated metal. And that's why folks in western deserts will tell you more people prefer RPM than any other brand of motor oil. There are other good reasons for RPM being first choice where driving's toughest. RPM cleans your engine as it lubricates, prevents ring clogging, and stops carbon formation. So for the best engine insurance you can buy, ask for RPM motor oil, first choice where driving's toughest. Ask at independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations where they say and mean we take better care of your car. And now, back to tonight's adventure of George Valentine. The voice of the giant, the huge tower clock that overlooks the strange house in the country, the clock whose owner died of a heart attack 2 weeks ago. But now his daughter Charlotte says that she killed him. Well, if your name is George Valentine, you realize it's Charlotte you must help. And you only hope that Claire Brooks, alone with Charlotte, will have better luck talking to her than you did.
I came back, and it was dark in the house, and I was all excited inside, and... Pick, pick, bomb, bomb, pick, pick, bomb, bomb. It says that, doesn't it? I've always thought it did ever since I was a little child. Only when I stood there, down in the hall, I suddenly realized it had stopped. The voice, the giant, had stopped. I ran upstairs, and there on the landing by the door of the tower, by the head of the stairs, was Father. But I thought you said... He was just standing there. He couldn't talk. His face was...
I understand.
I got him back to his room. He collapsed. He was dead. Oh, don't be stupid. The clock was running again, and don't you understand? What? Yes. After I called the doctor in the back hall, I heard it. The giant's voice. It had started again, even earlier than that.
You mean the giant stopped sometime while you were gone, and your father tried to climb up to fix it himself?
Of course, he couldn't make it. Or maybe he did.
And you blame yourself because you weren't here to look after it. To keep him from climbing those stairs with his heart.
If it sounds peculiar to you, Miss Brooks,
why not tell all this to Walter? After all, he deserves
and... I don't ever want to see Walter again.
You certainly hated your father, didn't you?
I did what? What did you...
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's none of my business.
You go now, Walter. All of you. Now you understand.
Yes, I guess I understand. Except maybe how it was that the clock stopped.
What?
And Charlotte, why is it that you still keep listening? What is it that you're still listening for now?
A sense of guilt, justified or not, could be a terrible thing.
Did you telephone the local doctor, George?
He said her father was a very sick man and had a heart attack, period. But I suggested he might take a look at the daughter.
Yes, I suppose he should. There's nothing I seem able to do.
Mr. Stanton, Charlotte hadn't told the doctor about the giant stopping that day. Hadn't told anyone else, I guess.
Why on earth do you suppose she didn't tell you any of this, any of it? And you didn't even find out about the death until today.
I'm not very good at riddles, Miss Brooks. Or at romance. I think we might as well be going. You've apparently done all you can for me, Mr. Valentine. It's up to time now.
You mean it's up to you?
Time. Everybody trying to grab onto it in this house. Oh, yes, Miss Brooks, I know. Perhaps in the future I'll be able
Just 1 second, Mr. Stanton.
Oh?
What was that business earlier of you prying into her father's desk?
I told you nothing. Crazy child, socks the book. Charlotte won't let him in here, but he thinks it all belongs to him. Her father hated the man, so she hates him, too.
Financial statements. That's all I could see on the desk.
I didn't even notice. I didn't see anything. Well, I'm taking the train back to town, so...
Yeah, sure. We're leaving, too. Good night, Mr. Stanton.
George, he was lying just now.
I know.
And so is Charlotte. About something.
Or still hiding something else.
Well, there's nothing we can do. She won't tell us. And what is it she still keeps listening for?
Haven't you figured that out, Brooksy? The sound of her own death. Come on. We're not giving up so fast.
This must be the cottage, George.
Yeah. Not much, is it? Guess the second cousin doesn't get much of an allowance. Stocksburg?
I don't see any lights.
Charlotte's only relative now, Angel. Door's unlocked.
Miss Walter's legally your husband.
Only for the time being.
Mr. Saxenberg.
Out of luck, Brooksy. Not at home.
And the doctor's the only person who can help us get Charlotte out of this
Wait a minute.
place.
Hold it.
What?
Look here. A piece of paper.
What is it?
A letter. A torn letter. Only it's torn roughly. Twisted.
George, remember when they were fighting in the study?
Yeah. You want to bet this is it? Walter was looking at something, only Tal got it away from him. It's a letter to Charlotte. Bronson, Burdick, and Locke.
What?
Lawyers, apparently. Sure. Real old line stuff. And they're coming up here, Brooksy, August 1st.
That's tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
Well, they would, naturally, to settle the estate.
No more than that, Angel. We are delighted with your decision to remain on in your father's house and are confident that you will eventually find happiness there. Please don't feel that we are criticizing your judgment concerning Mr. Stanton.
Walter?
But again, we must remind you to say and do nothing which would interfere with the annulment proceedings. Our investigation of him and of the circumstances of his first marriage confirms our belief that Mr. Stanton's interest in a woman of your lonely and susceptible position is solely money. And if he gets the opportunity, he will demand the largest possible settlement.
His wife. George Walter never mentioned a wife.
So as of tomorrow, Charlotte will have help. Lawyers in the house.
Walter must have seen that letter. That's why the fortune hunter ran out. He wanted to get away. What's that? Oh, the Zurich Giant.
5 minutes to the hour, Angel. Midnight. Yeah, as of tomorrow, the wheels will be in motion to cut the legal rights away from a fortune hunter and set up the poor little spinster to live here with a clock she really hates for the rest of...
Did you hear that?
Giant. The last bell.
Somebody's trying to stop the giant. George, run to her!
Charlotte! Charlotte, where are you? Charlotte! What did you... Hey, it's running again. The giant. Only don't kid me. Clocks like that don't stop by themselves. That's no electric boudoir number. Hey, who's up there? Who is it? Okay, friend. 3 flights to find out. Oh! Where are you? Where in the name...
Up there!
Suckable.
Stand there! Stand there, don't move! Yeah. A wrench in the hand of a strong man above you is better than a gun, no?
All that machinery, I can barely see
Stand
it.
still, I said, while I work.
So you're the smart apple who stops clocks now, Suckable?
I haven't stopped anything. I only slow up the time.
All right, so you're stopping it now then. I don't care. Because I got a different plan.
What's that? Oh, I warned you.
Well, Hammer. Old Carlo the Tools, huh? The master mechanic.
The man who really owns this clock. Don't move. I'm going to.
Yeah, sure. That's right. Work away. Man who really owns this clock, huh?
I own all of them. Her father stole them from me.
I bet there are 2 sides to that, Buster. Where's Charlotte?
I don't go away with Walter. I stay here, she says. She will keep me from ever having them. I show her.
The minute that stops, it'll kill her. Wherever she is.
You think people die because time stops? You superstition.
In her condition, the power of suggestion's enough to...
Who's up there? Who is it?
Charlotte.
And really, Mr. Valentine, no superstition. I do not get the heavy wheels to stop, but she comes anyway.
Yeah, sure. That's what you wanted. Just to get her up here.
I knew she would come. Come up to see.
You wanted to get her up here to kill her. To do it tonight before the lawyers come, so maybe you can get this house, get the clock.
Quiet. I wouldn't touch her, Mr. Valentine. We will slip past her, slip down the stairs.
What?
It's only you who are in danger for interfering.
Uncle Giles, where are you?
Stanton!
Let him come. There is time. Him, too.
Time for... Hey, what's that?
Hurry now. Slip past him.
Not so fast.
What's this?
Wilder, grab her.
Yeah.
I got this guy. Grab her, Stan. Can't you hear that ratchet? Get out of here, both of you.
Yes, but what?
It's the clock winding up. That giant bell's gonna... Get down those stairs. Fast. It'll strike. The giant. Run over the giant. Yeah. The realist. You wouldn't have to kill her, would you? Just get her up there next to that bell and lock the door. And she'd be a stark, raving lunatic for the rest of her days.
All my life, I wait for her father to die. And then she won't go away with a young man. She must keep the clocks, too.
But a lunatic would have to leave.
Why not? She killed her father. I wasn't here that day. Before she left the house, she must have stopped the giant, so her father...
Who killed him? Who stopped
Take it easy, Stanton. Charlotte, all right?
Yes, sure.
Nobody's been killed. Get it out of your head.
What? But he climbed with his
Her father
heart.
died of a heart attack, period. And after what Tile here did tonight, it'll be nice to wrap him up for a lot of things.
But
Charlotte came home that day and realized her father was standing by the landing by the tower door. But that's also the head of the stairs. Suppose he'd heard her come in, just walked out there from his room, had his attack right then and there.
I suppose he could have.
Why would he
but
have climbed all the way up to the tower and back? Because the clock stopped? Well, big machinery like the Giant doesn't stop and then start up again like she said it did all by itself. No, and nobody stopped it either. I just watched the master mechanic try it, and he couldn't. So how could Charlotte or you or anybody?
Yeah. I throw up the first bells a little.
And get this straight, Stanton. Charlotte said the clock wasn't running, and then later on it was. The night she ran up into the tower saying it had stopped, and it hadn't.
You mean it's all in her imagination?
I mean, maybe there's a simple explanation for that. Oh, sure, your mind can make your senses play tricks. But think back. How often tonight has she listened for the sound of the Giant? How often has she been frightened because she thought some other clock wasn't running? How often have all of us had to just plain repeat things to Charlotte?
Well,
it certainly wouldn't be surprising if in her condition she'd never even guess or want to guess that she's slowly becoming deaf from the pick, pick, pom, pom all her life. Always listening for it. And I'll bet the Giant runs on forever.
I'm so grateful, Mr. Valentine. I know now I'm not responsible for Father's death. The silly, hopeful delusions I used to cling to.
You mean Walter? Oh, don't say that, Charlotte. You wouldn't have been so upset about your father if you didn't really love Walter.
Oh.
I know he was married before, but that doesn't...
But that was a very unhappy night. Only the lawyer...
Listen to me, Charlotte. Your old line lawyers think he's a fortune hunter. And he's read their nasty letter and started to leave. But he came back when he was needed. Sure, he told me. His history takes a little explaining. But there's another side to it, Charlotte. He doesn't want your money. And he did come back here to fight for you, didn't he?
Well, I'd like to believe. You know that over our mantel there's a thing that says, I am chained to time and cannot thence depart.
I know one about time, too. The time God allots to each one of us is like a precious tissue which we embroider as we best know how. That's a better one to remember.
I think you're right, Miss Dixon. I wonder if Walter's still here.
I told him to stay, Charlotte. And I know one about time, too. Angel, it's time for us to go.
When your car begins to squeak, it's saying money, 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 money. It's a reminder that 60% of all auto repair bills are traced to irregular and faulty chassis lubrication. But there's a sure way to avoid repair bills and to enjoy riding comfort throughout the year. Every 1,000 miles, get a Car Saver chassis lubrication at a standard station or an independent Chevron gas station. Here they do a job that's thorough. They follow a lubrication chart that's designed and specifically approved for your car. They check more than 50 different trouble points. And they use RPM oils and greases. Also important, they do a neat, clean lubrication job. If you've already driven 1,000 miles or more since your last grease job, why not ask for this Car Saver service tomorrow? Ask for a chassis lubrication at independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations where they say and mean we take better care of your car. Tonight's transcribed adventure of George Valentine has been brought to you by Standard Oil Company of California on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West. Robert Bailey is starred as George, with Virginia Gregg as Brooksy. Let George Do It is written by David Victor and Jackson Gillis and directed by Don Clark. Lorene Tuttle was heard as Charlotte, Larry Dobkin as Walter, and Herb Butterfield as Kyle. The music is composed and presented by Eddie Dunstetter. Your announcer, John Heaston. Listen again next week, same time, same station, to Let George Do It. This is the Mutual Don Lee Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. Well, I love this episode. Really, right from the start, even from the opening credits, it was definitely a different beginning, and they used the clocks throughout to very good effect. The quote at the end, "The time God allots to each of us is like a precious tissue which we embroider as we best know how," was actually from Anatole France, a Nobel Prize literature winner, and from his book, The Crime of Sylvester Bonnard. And it's always somewhat interesting when these pretty interesting literary references make their way into the story. Well, that will do it for this week's episode of Let George Do It. Join us tomorrow for Sherlock Holmes, and next Wednesday we'll let George do it again. This episode of The Great Detectives of Old Time Radio is brought to you by our fantastic listeners and the financial support they provide. Thank you so much. Today's episode of Sherlock Holmes is The Case of the Cradle That Rocked Itself.
From New York, the makers of Clippercraft Clothes for Men and 924 leading retail stores from coast to coast present the world's most famous detective, Sherlock Holmes. Our stories are based upon the character of Sherlock Holmes, created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes is portrayed by John Stanley, Dr. Watson by Alfred Shirley, and the dramatizations are by Edith Meiser. Well, here we are again in front of Dr. Watson's cheerful fireplace, ready for another story about the fabulous Mr. Sherlock Holmes. What's it to be tonight, Dr. Watson?
Personally, I always refer to tonight's adventure as the Cornish Horror, or the case of the cradle that rocked itself.
The cradle that rocked itself? Why, that sounds fairly fantastic, Dr. Watson.
Not only fantastic, Mr. Harris, sinister. But before we become further involved in the exceptional events that occurred on the Cornish Peninsula, suppose you tell us of something exceptional that goes on all the time in the United States. I allude, of course, to the Clippercraft plan.
With a great deal of pleasure, Dr. Watson. The Clippercraft plan really is something exceptional, and it goes on in the hometown of every man listening in. As a matter of fact, the great big idea behind the Clippercraft plan is to give you the finest clothes at prices far less than you expect to pay. At your own local independent store. At the store you can trust. Now, here's how it works. The remarkable Clippercraft plan concentrates the buying power of 924 leading stores across America, making tremendous savings in manufacturing and distribution costs. It passes on those savings to you. That's why you can buy beautifully tailored Clippercraft suits that look like twice the money at only $40 and $45. Top coats and overcoats are only $40. The values are so amazingly outstanding that we urge you to compare them with clothes selling for many dollars more. And now to return to Cornwall. What were you and Sherlock Holmes doing down there, Dr. Watson?
Recuperating. Holmes had spent a particularly active autumn solving 3 dangerous and exhausting cases in rapid succession, and a vacation was indicated. I had visions of basking in the south of France or sunny Italy, but not Holmes. He elected to return to the small cottage near Poldhu Bay, which we had occupied once before.
During the adventure of the Devil's Foot, if I'm not mistaken, Doctor.
Right. Now, the bays and inlets of the Cornish Peninsula are green and sheltering in the sunny summer weather. But in December, the blustering gales whipped the surge-swept reefs and black and sinister cliffs. Well, one particularly violent morning, Holmes and I were ensconced on either side of the fireplace. Holmes was engrossed in a consignment of books on philology, which had just arrived from London.
Watson, has it ever occurred to you that the ancient Cornish language is akin to the Chaldean?
Well, inasmuch as I understand neither Cornish nor Chaldean, I can't say it has.
It's quite logical, you know. These shores were undoubtedly visited by early Phoenician traders in tin. In fact, many historians believe that the pirates who later operated from this coast had more than their share of the old Phoenician heritage.
Find his reputable background for any district.
Profitable is the word, Watson. Hello, who's this fighting his way up the path in the teeth of the gale?
Looks like your rotund friend and fellow archaeologist, Mr. Roundhay, the vicar.
I wonder what's occurred to bring the good Dominie out in this weather. I'd sooner expect to see a cat go swimming in a mill race. Well, don't let him stand there in the wet.
Well, I'm going. But you couldn't answer the door now and then. Why, Mr. Roundhay, delighted to see you, old man. Come in. Well, you look half drowned.
Not half, entirely. Totally and entirely soaked to the skin.
Morning, Roundhay. How about a spot of hot grog? The tea kettle's boiling on the hearth. Watson, fix the vicar a drink.
Thank you. I'm afraid I need it as much for my nerves as I do for the chill, you know.
Oh?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. I have a problem, a rather serious problem, and I really don't know whether to come to Dr. Watson for help or to you.
Well, why not consult both of us? It's not the first time we've collaborated on a case, Holmes?
Quiet, Watson. Don't interrupt. Just what is your problem, Mr. Roundhay?
Well, it seems that the cradle at Trevining Water has been rocking again.
Is that so unusual?
You don't understand, Mr. Holmes. That cradle has been in the family for over 5 centuries. All the young Trevinings are placed in it at birth. It hasn't been used, however, since Wilfrida Trevining, the present Mrs. Gregory, was a child. In fact, the nursery has been kept locked ever since old Mattie, the Trevining nurse, was sent off to the home for indigent females at Redruth 3 months ago. She'd been in the family for nearly 60 years, you see.
Well, seems rather heartless to get rid of her, Holmes?
My thought exactly. But Mortimer Gregory, he's the one who is married to Wilfrida Trevining, was quite determined about the matter. He said that old Mattie was making his wife quite ill with her talk about the rocking cradle.
What sort of talk?
Well, you see, there's a sort of legend in the Trevining family that when one of them is about to die, the cradle starts to rock all by itself.
Nice, eerie little superstition, Holmes?
As a matter of fact, the cradle had been heard rocking once or twice, but inasmuch as old Mattie was still sleeping in the nursery, the family took it as a rather grim practical joke, all except Wilfrida. She became quite ill and upset, at which point her husband, who has a violent temper, said the old nurse had to go. Dr. Dennis Trevining, who is Wilfrida's cousin and physician as well, was inclined to agree with him, so they sent for a nurse from St. Ives Hospital to take over. On the day that she arrived, I was summoned to drive Mattie to the old lady's home in Redruth. I can't say I looked forward to the event.
Were your fears justified?
Completely justified, Mr. Holmes. When I arrived at Trevining Water, the old woman was sitting on her boxes just inside the front door. Mr. Gregory and Dr. Trevining were endeavoring to quiet her caterwaul.
Calls herself a nurse, does she? What does she know about bringing babies into the world? I've given 3 generations of Trevinings the whack that drove the breath of life into their bodies.
After all, Mattie, I am a doctor. When Wilfrida's baby arrives, I expect to be on hand, too, you know.
You a doctor? I wouldn't trust you to treat my Timothy here. Hey, Timmy. Timmy agrees with me. He may be a cat, but he knows as much about what's going on around here as I do.
That'll
and that's
do.
plenty.
Mattie, that'll do. We've made enough trouble already. You've upset my wife so that she's had to take to her bed.
Me upset, Miss Wilfrida. My Miss Willie that I taught to walk and play patty cake and eat a porridge like a good girl. It's not me that's made her sick. And what's more, if any harm comes to her, I'll put a curse on this house. Though there's 10 miles of moorland between here and Redruth, I'll come back and rock that cradle somehow. And you know what that means.
Well, Mr. Holmes, I felt sorry for Mattie, of course, but I must say I saw Mr. Gregory and Dr. Trevining's point. A screaming old crone like that isn't the most soothing influence around a house in which there is an expectant mother.
Quite. Tell me, Vicar, is this Mrs. Gregory, the former Wilfrida Trevining, easily upset by these family superstitions about rocking cradles and the like?
I really couldn't say, Mr. Holmes. Wilfrida was always a delicate girl. She was an only child, you see, and the one heir to that branch of the family.
Significant, Holmes? I suppose she inherited quite a tidy estate.
She did indeed, Dr. Watson. Her father would have disinherited her if he could when she ran off with that Gregory chap. But the estate is entailed, and I must say the marriage turned out better than most of us expected.
Then you don't think Mortimer Gregory married her for her money?
Not necessarily, Mr. Holmes. Gregory was an artist who came to these parts one summer to do a bit of sketching. Naturally, the Trevinings thought he was one of those ne'er-do-well bohemians, but it seems he's rather famous and sells his pictures for quite handsome prices.
I see. I take it the girl and her father reconciled.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. When he heard that she was to have a child, he sent for her. Although the child will bear the name Gregory, he will inherit the Trevining estate. The Trevinings are always born at Trevining Water, needless to say. Any other arrangement would be unthinkable.
Quite.
Wilfrida Gregory and her new husband came back as soon as possible after receiving her father's letter asking for reconciliation. 1 week after the return, old Mr. Trevining was dead, and Wilfrida had inherited the estates.
I take it her father's death was sudden and unexpected.
Oh, quite unexpected, Mr. Holmes. He'd been as fit as a fiddle up to Wednesday night. Thursday, shortly after his mid-afternoon whiskey and soda, he complained that his mouth and throat felt sore. Half an hour later, vomiting set in, followed by violent cramps and general collapse.
Did no one send for a doctor?
Mr. Trevining's nephew, Dr. Dennis Trevining, was in the house at the time.
There was, of course, an autopsy and an inquest.
Good heavens, no, Mr. Holmes. Whatever for? Mr. Trevining had been subject for some years to violent gastro-digestive upsets. It was all perfectly unavoidable and natural.
An autopsy is always indicated in any case of sudden death, Mr. Roundhay.
But what good would it do?
It might just possibly prevent another fatality. Just when did Mrs. Gregory's health begin to fail?
Her father's death was a shock to her. She took to her bed for about a week after the funeral.
It was quite understandable, Holmes?
Don't interrupt, Watson.
After that, she was up and about for a month or two, but her color was bad, and she seemed to be decidedly nervous. Like a good many women in the early stages of her condition, she experienced a certain amount of nausea.
Has that nausea persisted?
It has, Mr. Holmes, and when old Mattie began to rant on about the rocking cradle, Mrs. Gregory became thoroughly alarmed and had to be put to bed.
Did her condition improve, Mr. Roundhay, after they got rid of the old woman?
For a time, she seemed greatly improved. She was up and about for nearly a month. Then, week before last, she suffered a rather frightening relapse and has been in bed ever since.
I see. How soon is her baby due to be born?
Oh, in about a fortnight, I believe.
Has Dr. Trevining called in any outside medical opinion?
No, Mr. Holmes, but that's not too incredible when you realize how removed we are from civilization.
Possibly if they knew that Dr. Watson was here in the vicinity.
The new nurse made that suggestion to Dr. Trevining, but both he and Mr. Gregory were decidedly hostile to the idea. The nurse is, I may say, rather badly frightened. Today was her day off, and she dropped in at the vicarage shortly after breakfast. She admitted she had never been so terrified in her entire life, living there in the old Trevining house, part keep, part castle, but she said she wasn't the only one.
Oh?
Poor Mrs. Gregory lies there, stiff with terror, with her eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for it to begin. The sound of the cradle rocking.
Miss, it's getting dark. Light the lamp.
Very well, Mrs. Gregory.
That's better. When I was a child, I was afraid of the dark, and now it's all come back to me. I dread the coming of night.
When one's sick, that's only natural. The nights are so long, I always think.
It's not that, Miss. When night comes, it begins. The rocking of the cradle. I lie here, watching for it. Yes. Listen.
I don't hear anything, Mrs. Gregory.
Oh, if only I could be sure my baby's born before I die. It's so terribly important, Miss.
But you're not going to die, Mrs. Gregory.
Yes, I am. That's why the cradle's rocking. Listen. There it goes. Rock. 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 It's for me, Miss. It's for me.
Sounds like delirium, eh, Holmes? A cradle that is heard only by a desperately sick woman?
But you don't understand, Dr. Watson. Mrs. Gregory isn't the only one who hears the cradle rocket. The nurse can hear it, too. The nursery at Trevining Water is directly over the master bedroom, and that rocking cradle can be heard several times a night.
But only intermittently.
That's right, Mr. Holmes.
And never in the daytime?
No, always after dark. Miss Henderson, the nurse, says it's having a dreadful effect on Mrs. Gregory. She's in a state of great exhaustion. In the last few days, the nurse has also noticed a local pustular eruption. That could be induced by the nervous strain, I suppose.
Not necessarily. Yes, I think Dr. Watson and I had better pay a visit to Trevining Water shortly after dark today. I trust we can persuade her family to allow Dr. Watson to have a look at Mrs. Gregory, and I think I can suggest what he's to look for. As for myself, I'm more interested in what causes that cradle to rock.
Did you have to drag us out in this beastly weather, Holmes? Besides, it's all so dashed irregular, contrary to medical ethics and all that, you know. After all, I haven't been called in by either the doctor on the case nor the family.
You doctors and your confounded medical ethics. I suppose you'd let the poor woman die just because you haven't been properly introduced.
This is where we turn in, Mr. Holmes. Notice the Trevining coat of arms over the gate?
Aha, very significant, Mr. Roundhay.
Oh, what's so significant about it? I could hardly see the blasted thing in this fading light.
For one thing, the Trevinings had the bar sinister. For another, that was the Jolly Roger up in the upper right-hand quarter.
That's right, Mr. Holmes. The Trevinings have more than their share of pirate ancestors. They boast of the fact, you know. Well, here we are. This is Trevining water.
Frightening-looking old pile, eh, Holmes?
You bet. Wait for us here, Jonathan.
Right. We may be leaving in rather a hurry. Give the bell a pull, Watson.
No, wait. I sent word to Miss Henderson to be on the lookout for us. Ah, Miss Henderson, I thought you'd be watching for us. This is Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
How do you do?
Come in, please. I'm so glad you've both come. Both. Mrs. Gregory was having a particularly bad spell when I returned this afternoon.
Have you told Mrs. Gregory's husband and her doctor that you expected us?
No, Mr. Holmes. Fortunately, there was no opportunity. The doctor was called out on a confinement case an hour or so ago, and Mr. Gregory has had to go to St. Ives for the assizes. He shouldn't be back until after supper.
Excellent. You will take Dr. Watson to see Mrs. Gregory immediately. Mr. Roundhay knows the house well enough to direct me to the nursery, I gather.
Oh, yes, Mr. Holmes. Top floor, second right.
I'm afraid the door is kept locked, Mr. Holmes.
My dear young lady, it takes more than a locked door to stop Sherlock Holmes. Come along, Vicar.
Here we are. It's the next door.
It's locked right enough.
Then there's nothing we can do.
On the contrary, I have a very neat little jemmy that I acquired when I was instrumental in apprehending a certain famous cat burglar. Quite a breeze coming through the keyhole.
You mean you're going to pick the lock?
May take a moment or so.
Well, I do hope no one comes and catches us at it. I don't know what my flock would say. Mr. Holmes, did you hear that? There it is again. It's inside the nursery.
Yes. Yes, it's the cradle right enough.
But it's rocking. It's rocking in there all by itself. It's not just a superstition.
Confound it, this lock must be rusty. No, here it comes. Blast it, did it have to make that noise? Easy now. I'm going to open the door.
It's so dark in there.
Give me the candle, I'm going in.
But the room is empty.
Completely empty. But look here, the cradle's still rocking, and feel the mattress.
It's still warm. But good Lord, what was that?
Branch of a tree scraping against the window. Yes, it's broken one of the small 5-inch square panes of glass, and that explains where the draft came from. It also explains something else. Yes, interesting. Very interesting.
Who let you in this room?
Ah, Mr. Gregory, no doubt. I am Sherlock Holmes.
What in blazes do you think you're doing here?
Trying to solve the mystery of the rocking cradle.
Rotten rubbish. Old wives' tales. I'll not have my wife upset by any more of that nonsense.
You misjudge us, Mr. Gregory. We only want to save your wife and possibly your child.
I don't need your help. Get out, both of you. Get out!
With pleasure. I imagine Watson's had time to give the nurse full instructions, and we've seen all there is to see up here. Come on, Roundhay. We'll now ride over to Red Roof. The final piece to this puzzle is doubtless to be found in the old lady's home.
You mean you're going to question Mattie?
I trust you have no objections, Mr. Gregory.
Objections? No, go ahead. You'll get nothing from her. Nothing at all. So kind of you to see us, matron, particularly this late in the evening.
It is well after our visiting hours, Mr. Roundhead. But when they told me it was the Vicar of Tredanick, Wallace, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I'll admit my curiosity got the best of me. But you gentlemen must be congealed. May I offer you a cup of tea?
Thank you, matron, but we've no time for social amenities. Our night's work has only just begun. So, if you'll allow us to have a few words with one of your inmates, Miss Mattie, what's her other name, Vicar?
bless my soul, I don't know. But she was nurse in the Trevine household for many years. She came here to the home 3 months ago.
Oh, you mean Mattie Fennelly with her?
Of course, of course.
I'm afraid you can't see Mattie, gentlemen.
Why not? Is anything wrong with her? Is she ill?
No, Mr. Holmes. Mattie Fennelly died 6 weeks ago.
Died?
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
But why wasn't I told? Why wasn't her body brought back to us for proper burial?
Well, I understand her family didn't want Mrs. Gregory to know. They were afraid the shock of Mattie's death would upset her.
Quite. Matron, how did the old woman die? Had she been sick long?
Oh, no, Mr. Holmes. She'd had a very good day. Mrs. Gregory had driven over from Cradle to have tea with her. She brought a pound cake for Mattie. Pound cake was her favorite, it seems.
How soon after Mrs. Gregory left was Mattie taken ill?
Not till the middle of the night. Seems she sneaked the rest of the pound cake off to bed with her and had eaten it after the lights were put out.
Well, old people and children frequently make pigs of themselves, I'm afraid.
We sent for Dr. Dennis Trevining at once. He lives halfway between Redruth and Tredannick Wallace. He was here inside of an hour. She seemed to get better when she saw him. Shortly thereafter, she had another attack, which ended in a complete collapse.
Oh, this is an exasperating case, Holmes. One blind alley after another. Old Mattie turning up dead slams the final door in our face.
On the contrary, we may very well find out more from Mattie dead than we would if she were alive.
But where will you go to question her, Mr. Holmes?
To the graveyard, of course. Where is she buried, Matron?
In the churchyard at St. Stephen's. It's on the cliffs at the other side of the town.
I don't suppose you could supply us with a couple of shovels, Matron?
Oh, Holmes, you're not thinking of exhuming the body at this hour of the night?
Why not? Just one more question, Matron. What happened to Mattie's cat after her death?
Timothy?
Yes.
Oh, he disappeared shortly after the funeral. No one knows what happened to him, Mr. Holmes.
I think I can make a guess, Matron. Yes, I think I can make a guess.
Ask the millions of men who wear Clippercraft clothes. Ask the fine stores that make them available to you everywhere, from coast to coast. The reason there's so much talk about Clippercraft is that they're so extremely fine at the price of just ordinary clothes. It's a pleasure to discuss Clippercraft on this program because I know I do a good turn to every man listening in. Regardless of price, you've never seen finer tailoring, longer wearing woolens, or more perfect fit. Suits are only $40 and $45. Top coats and overcoats are only $40. The famous Clippercraft plan makes all this possible. It concentrates the buying power of 924 leading independent stores across the nation. You get the savings that result from this group buying. Selling expensive clothes at inexpensive low prices at the nation's finest independent stores is the great big idea behind the Clippercraft plan. That's why men who know insist on Clippercraft clothes. So be sure to visit the Clippercraft store in your city.
These leading stores in the metropolitan area are proud to add their names to Clippercraft in your suit, top coat, and overcoat. In Manhattan, Saks 34th, Broadway at 34th. John Wanamaker Men's Stores, Broadway at 8th and 67 Liberty Street. In Brooklyn, Abraham and Strauss. In Newark, New Jersey, Boulevard Men's Shop, Kresge Newark. And in Jamaica, the B&B Clothes Shop, 16408 Jamaica Avenue.
Oh, here, you take the shovel, Holmes. It's your turn. I'm exhausted.
That's what comes of letting yourself get out of condition.
Yes, I like that. Oh, thank heaven the gale has gone down.
But the sea is still boiling.
The moon's trying to break through the clouds. It makes the breakers down there look like a devil's cauldron.
Job's done. Now, Watson, if you and Mr. Roundhay will help me lift out the coffin.
Certainly, Mr. Holmes. Oh, the authorities will probably raise Ned. Now, all together. 1, 2...
I say, Holmes, the coffin was remarkably light.
Oh, Mattie was a very little woman.
Holmes, look. There's someone galloping over the moor as if the devil were after him. He's coming here.
Good Lord, it's Dr. Trevining. Oh, we're in for it now.
Oh, there, Vixen. Steady, steady. Now then,
Just what's going on here?
Dr. Devaney, we're just taking a look at old Matty, Mr. Sherlock Holmes and his friend, Dr. Watson.
Oh, he did. Busybody, meddler. I heard you came to Divining this afternoon and saw my patient without consulting me. And now this. I suppose you've got a permit for this.
No, I can't say we have. We couldn't afford to take time.
Why not?
We didn't want to give you the opportunity to finish off Mrs. Gregory the way you did her father and old Matty.
Finish off my uncle and Matty? Why should I do that?
Because you were determined to inherit the estate of Divining Water. If you had to kill off half the parish to do it.
You're mad. There's no proof. The bodies are both decomposed.
I wonder, would you like to help us pry off the lid of this coffin? Watson, hand me that chisel.
I protest. This is monstrous.
Not as monstrous as murder, Dr. Divining. Now then. Slide the lid off the other side, Watson.
All right.
Now, Mr. Roundhay, if you'll bring the lantern over here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good Lord. The body. She looks exactly the way she did when she died.
When she died in agony, remember?
No. Put back the lid. It's too unnatural. Her eyes, she's staring at me in that awful grin.
There was no autopsy on old Mr. Trevining. In this case, however...
But I...
Would you like to put your hand on the body, Dr. Trevining?
No.
There's a local superstition that when a murderer touches the body of his victim, blood will flow.
No, let me go. Let me go.
He's riding in the wrong direction.
He's headed for the cliffs.
Good Lord. He rode the horse straight over the edge.
They'll be smashed to death on the reefs.
Devil's Cauldron, as Watson called it, has claimed its own. Yes, the rocks on which his pirate ancestors wrecked so many helpless ships.
I'm not surprised the sight of old Matty's body unnerved him. Who would suspect that after 6 weeks there would be almost no signs of decomposition?
I not only suspected it, Mr. Roundhay, I knew.
How so?
Dr. Dennis Trevining chose one of the few poisons that also tends to act as a preservative. I allude, of course, to tartar emetic, commonly called antimony. Why, that story was a corker, Dr. Watson, and Dennis Trevining was certainly a throwback to his pirate ancestors.
Yes, Mr. Harris.
But look, why didn't he finish off his uncle and his cousin years before?
Because as long as Wilfreda had no child, he was due to inherit anyway.
You mean the estate wouldn't have gone to her husband?
No, Mr. Harris. In England, the laws of inheritance are rather rigid. If a married woman who owns estates dies after giving birth to a living child, her husband will hold the lands for life as tenant by the courtesy of England.
And that's what Dennis Trevining was determined to prevent at any cost. But why didn't Wilfreda die as quickly as her father, Doctor?
Because more than one sudden death in the family would have been suspicious. Therefore, Wilfreda was given repeated small doses of the poison, which produced rather different symptoms.
And what about Matty?
Matty undoubtedly suspected what was going on, but was afraid to say anything. Hence the cradle rocking. She was trying to warn her mistress. Eventually, when she was taken ill from overeating, the temptation to get her out of the way was too great, and Dr. Trevining killed her too.
But the cradle, Doctor, it continued to rock after her death. Who rocked the cradle?
The cat. Matty's black cat, Timothy. He found his way back to his old home, climbed up the tree outside the nursery window and entered through the broken window pane, and made himself at home in the most comfortable piece of furniture, the old cradle. Holmes knew at once what had happened.
Well, how, Doctor?
By observing some short black cat hair on the mattress.
Of course, it's also obvious.
Yes. One Sherlock Holmes points out the explanation.
Got me that time. Well, Dr. Watson, what's our story to be about next week?
Next week, I think I'll tell you how Professor Moriarty ran amok during Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, stealing famous jewels, robbing banks, blackmailing millionaires, and finally how he came very close to blowing up a ball at Buckingham Palace.
The makers of Clippercraft Clothes and 924 leading stores from coast to coast have brought you another in the new series of broadcasts featuring the world's most famous detective, Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is produced and directed by Basil Lochran with special music by Albert Berman. If If you don't know your Clippercraft dealer, write Clippercraft, 200 Fifth Avenue, New York City. Be sure to listen next week to Sherlock Holmes in the case of Professor Moriarty and the Diamond Jubilee. If you'd like to attend the Sherlock Holmes broadcasts in New York, see your local Clippercraft dealer, and he'll tell you how to obtain your tickets. This is Cy Harris speaking for Clippercraft Code. This is the world's largest network, serving more than 450 radio stations, the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. Well, one has to concede Watson's point when he says that the case seemed simple once Sherlock Holmes explained the solution. Though I was leaning a little bit more towards the husband as the culprit, just because that's a little bit more typical in these mystery stories when the wife controls a large amount of money that the husband does not. I do think they put a good number of twists and turns, and as a pure mystery, this may have been the best one so far that wasn't based on an original Arthur Conan Doyle story. Though this one does have them returning, as they mentioned, to the side of the Devil's Foot. And you have to wonder why you would want to go back there after for vacation after the last time you were in the Cornish area and had that experience. I also noted at least once here where Holmes told Watson to stop interrupting, where Watson was not technically interrupting. But that's just sort of the cranky back and forth we have going in this particular Holmes-Watson pairing. Well, we do have a comment from a listener, Javier, who is somewhat disappointed with episode 509, The Affair of the Politician, the Lighthouse, and the Trained Cormorant. So disappointing. I remember reading a story, in a Conan Doyle story, Watson saying something on the line that attempts were being made to steal records from Holmes' archives, and if this did not stop the affair of the politician, the Lighthouse and the Trained Cormorant would be revealed. And Watson added, one reader will know what this means. Reading this, I was fascinated about the possibilities of this story that had to involve someone who either was let go by Holmes or an affair so sensitive that had to be hushed and attempts were being made to steal the records. Who was the politician? What was the cormorant trained to do? But this story involves a half-witted criminal, a drunk old woman that stunk of fish. Cormorant was not trained but slightly domesticated, and everybody got caught and nothing hushed, so no attempt will be made to steal Holmes's record. Oh well, I guess the writing can't always be attentive to many details as I would like. Anyway, sorry about the rant, but I now feel better. Love the podcast. Thanks, Javier, and that's it's definitely understandable. And I don't think when Doyle mentions these other incidents, he had any complicated plot ideas in mind. So it really did give the writers a lot of freedom to do what they would like with the story. But based on your description of how Doyle described the story, I definitely agree that they could have done better. It was mostly a kind of okay episode. But thanks so much for your comments, Javier. Much appreciated. And that will do it for today's episode. We'll be back tomorrow with yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Kalispell, Montana, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Give us a call, 208-991-4783, and become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Radio Detectives. That's right, folks. I mentioned I'm coming to you from Kalispell, Montana. I was actually on vacation visiting family, but I want to make sure we got these recorded. Of course, by the time this airs, I'll be back in Boise, but we're in Kalispell today. And this is actually my second attempt at recording the show, and I learned a valuable recording lesson I should have known. Never try and record your show on a cell phone while sitting next to the air conditioner / heater while it's running. So lesson learned, and we'll see how we're doing now, this time in no general area of that. Before we do get started, I do want to remind you about JohnnyDollarAir.com. JohnnyDollarAir.com is powered by Priceline, so you have two great ways to save money. Either choose from great published specials, or you can name your own price on hotels, rental cars, airline tickets, and even more. In fact, the hotel room I'm staying in right now got it a great deal on a published fare right off of Priceline. So just remember, JohnnyDollarAir.com first when you're making your travel plans. All right, well, now it's time for today's episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. It's called The Thelma Ibsen Matter. Please enjoy.
From Hollywood, it's time now for John Lund as
Johnny Dollar. My name's DeFranco, Mr. Dollar. I'm with the Claims Division of Eastern Life and Trust.
What can I do for you, Mr. DeFranco?
Help me pay off a claim, I hope.
Well, that's a new wrinkle.
Yeah, one of our new policyholders passed away last month. We can't seem to locate his beneficiary.
Well, maybe he doesn't want the money.
It's a she. Everybody wants money, especially insurance money. Would you like to take a whack at it?
What floor are you on, Mr. DeFranco?
Fourth, 418. Just after you get off the elevator, turn to your left.
Be there in an hour. John Lund in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar. 2 Claims Office, Eastern Life and Trust Company, this city. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Thelma Ibsen matter. Expense account item 1, 15 cents, bus fare, from my apartment to Milton DeFranco's office, where we got right down to business.
The deceased was a man named John Linden. He made his living selling papers in front of the Metropolitan Building.
Oh, on 3rd Street?
Yes. Did you ever see him?
Yeah, I guess I have. Somehow you never think of someone like that leaving insurance money.
No, you don't, but he took out 2 policies November the 5th, 1940, both of them $500 lives. So he has an estate of $1,000 that we have to give to a person named Thelma Ibsen.
His daughter or something?
No relation at all, just someone who stopped and talked to him one day.
He must have had quite a line.
Yeah, you'd think so, but I doubt it. He was only 10 years old at the time.
Oh.
I got all this from the agent who wrote up the policy. Used to buy his papers from old John. One day he told the agent he wanted to take out some life insurance so he could do something nice for a little girl he'd met that afternoon. And I said...
Quite a profitable meeting for her, huh?
Yeah. Of course, $1,000 isn't a lot of money these days. But from him, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Thelma Ibsen must be 23 or 4 by now. I'd like to see her face when she gets that insurance check and finds out who it's from and why. Might prove something about something.
Yeah, it could, or maybe she isn't doing nice things for people anymore.
Well, let's hope she is. I keep thinking of that old man out there hustling papers every day to make his $1.52 in premiums every week. It gets me somehow.
Huh?
He only saw her that one day in his life.
The local address for Thelma Ibsen was 213 Brainbridge. From neighbors, I learned that Thelma's parents had been killed in an automobile accident in 1945. She'd moved crosstown to live with an aunt, a Mrs. Mary Seeley. Mrs. Seeley died in 1950. Again, Thelma had moved. Where, nobody seemed to know. But they did know where she'd been working at the time. One of the girls there was brought into the manager's office.
Yes. She quit without notice a couple of years ago. She just didn't come back.
Were you a friend of hers?
Yes. We were good friends. Used to have lunch together every day. We started here together, too.
I see. Have you heard from her?
No.
Any idea where she might have gone?
New York, I think. That's the closest place to go, isn't it?
Funny she didn't write anybody or say anything when she left, don't you think?
Yes, but Thelma was like that.
Like what?
Well, don't misunderstand me. She was a real sweet girl, but there was something you could tell about her right away when you met her. She had plans of her own, and she just kept them to herself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't suppose anything's happened to her.
I'm just trying to locate her. Did she ever talk about going to New York?
No.
Well, what did she talk about?
Oh, about meeting someone and getting married.
Was she going with anyone when she disappeared?
Oh, a couple of people around the office.
Are they still around?
I think so. You going to talk to them?
I'd like to.
They haven't heard from her either. No one has. She just plain left, bag and baggage.
At the apartment hotel where she'd been living since her aunt's death, I learned that Thelma Ibsen had suddenly checked out with all of her belongings around Christmas of 1950. No forwarding address. The hospital, jail, and morgue records for the previous 2 years were covered. Nothing came up. A high school annual provided a fairly good picture of a tall, smiling girl with a pleasant face looking out from under a mitre cap. The Motor Vehicle Bureau recorded a driver's license issued in her name. A right thumb and forefinger print came with it. The picture, the prints, and all available information went into a file. Thelma Ibsen became a missing person. 2 days later, the people at her office were re-questioned. And then one of them recalled a man that she had been seen with just before her disappearance. Expense account item 2, $15. Transportation and incidentals, Hartford to New York. For the purpose of locating a Mr. Floyd Turnbull for possible information concerning Thelma Ibsen's whereabouts. I made a list of the Floyd Turnbulls in the city directory and set out to interview each one. The right man happened to be number 5 on my list.
Yes, of course I know Thelma Ibsen, Mr. Dollar. You say you're from an insurance company?
That's right, Mr. Turnbull. Can you tell me where she is right now?
I'm afraid I can't. Sit down, Mr. Dollar. Sit down.
Thanks. Understand you knew her in Hartford.
That's right, I did. She came here to New York with me.
Oh?
Let me assure you, there was nothing improper about it. I met Thelma when she was working in one of the offices I do business with there. And when I suggested that she drive to New York with me, I did it with the understanding that we were to be married here.
I see.
No one could have been more surprised than I when she disappeared.
You mean here in New York?
Yes.
Well, when was this?
It was Christmas Eve of 1950.
Oh.
Thelma was staying with my sister Edna in Westchester. I picked her up about 6 in the evening to go to a party. And we stopped for gasoline somewhere between here and Long Island. I left the car for a moment, and when I came back, she was gone.
You haven't seen her since?
And I haven't seen her since.
Well, did she leave a note in the car? Or a message of some kind?
Nothing, not a word.
And she hasn't gotten in touch with you at all?
No.
She's never written?
Never.
I can't quite get with this. You were going to be married, and she disappeared in a filling station on Christmas Eve. Did you argue or something?
No. I don't think I would ever have argued with Thelma. She was kind and sweet and gentle, and all things to me. Your appearance here and these questions bring back the memory very strongly.
How long had you known her before you decided to get married?
About 3 weeks.
Do you have any idea why she walked away?
Yes, but I doubt if it's of any practical value to you.
Well, any information I can get would be very helpful in locating her, Mr. Turnbull.
All right, then. I think she was frightened.
Of what?
Of life, Mr. Dollar. Not people or circumstance, but life.
You say that with a lot of conviction.
Yes. Thelma had always been, well, a poor girl. She worked instead of going to college. She lived with a rather dowdy aunt who died just before I met her. Her parents had been killed in an accident a few years before. I think I offered her happiness that she always longed for. She simply wasn't mature enough or adjusted well enough to accept it. But this is of no value, isn't it?
Well, it might be. Did you know of any ambitions she had? Maybe she wanted to go on the stage.
She simply wanted to be my wife and live here. Oh, I can see what you're thinking. I'm old enough to be her father, but that's not the reason she walked away from that car. Believe me, Mr. Dollar, unless I'm terribly mistaken, that girl was very much in love with me and wanted to marry me.
Tell me, have you tried to find her?
No, I have not. I waited around the filling station that night hoping she'd return, but I didn't report the matter to the police. I intended to hire private detectives to locate her, but I gave that up, too.
Well, I don't understand. If you loved her...
Well, would this make it understandable, Mr. Dollar? Thelma was a rational, normal human being when I left her in that car. No one forced her away from it or me. The man at the station said she merely stepped out and disappeared down the street. She left of her own free will for her own reasons.
Yeah, I think I can see your point.
Thank you, Mr. Dollar. I've hoped that one day she'd appear at my door, contact me, come to me, but she hasn't. Is there any way I can help you more concretely?
Well, if you could tell me the exact location of that filling station.
I believe I can do that, but why?
Last place she was seen alive.
That word, alive.
Just a word, Mr. Turnbull. Tell me, do you suppose she had any money when she left?
Why do you ask?
Well, she'd have had to go to work if she didn't. Maybe she
I see. Yes, she had money, quite a bit.
How much?
$2,300.
Oh?
She stole it from me, Mr. Dollar. I left my wallet in my overcoat. She took it while I was gone. I would have given her all this, everything. But she had to steal it from me. She had to steal it like a common little thief. There's truly no fool like an old fool, is there, Mr. Dollar?
When I left Turnbull, it struck me. Here was the second elderly man in Thelma Ibsen's life. One had given her money which she wasn't around to receive, and from this one she'd taken money and didn't wait around to say thanks. Expense account item 3, $50.50. Car rental and incidentals involved in checking Floyd Turnbull's story. A major oil company owned and operated the filling station where Thelma Ibsen had been seen last. Their payroll records named 3 attendants on duty Christmas Eve, 1950. I located and interviewed all 3. Enclosed fine statement of Earl Camden.
Sure, I remember that chick. Better look in this picture, I'll tell you that. Well, anyways, she drove in with the old guy, see? He hadn't been away from the car more than 20 seconds before she was out and walking down the street as fast as she could go. When he came back and asked what happened to her, I told him. Well, and he went back and sat in his car for maybe a couple of hours just waiting for her. I knew she was gone for good. I felt sorry for the old geezer. She shouldn't have run out like that. Christmas Eve and all.
Edna Turnbull Spencer, Westchester, verified her brother's story. Thelma Ibsen had left all of her clothes at the house. Mrs. Spencer had not heard a word from her since Christmas Eve of 1950. The matter went to the New York Police Missing Persons Bureau. A check on the morgue and hospital records was unsuccessful. However, the police fingerprint files turned up an interesting lead. Misdemeanor, drunk, disturbing the peace. She was fined $25 a night, court April 25th, 1951. What's the address? 1212 Yardley. 1212 Yardley. Okay. At the address on Yardley, I learned that Thelma Ibsen had moved 8 months before. Again, there was no forwarding address. The landlady turned out to be quite talkative, however.
I'm glad, too, she moved from here, Mr. Dollar. I'd like to help you find her, but I'm awfully glad she moved from here.
Well, why do you say that, Mrs. Prentice?
Oh, noisy. Parties all the time. I run a quiet place for quiet people, you know.
Yes, I'm sure, but...
I thought she was the quiet type when she took the apartment, or I'd never have given it to her. She told me she was secretary. that she worked downtown.
Did she say where?
Oh, no. That she didn't work. How could she? She was out every night and slept most of the day. And men who used to come to see her. Honestly.
Do you know any of them, Mrs. Prentice?
Oh, no. Just men. All kinds, all sorts.
See. Was she friendly with anybody in the building?
No.
Did she go with any particular man?
I couldn't say. All I can tell you is I'm glad she doesn't live here anymore. I'm awfully glad.
The more people I talked to, the more I learned about Thelma Ibsen, and the less I liked what I heard. I went back to the city hall. It had occurred to me that hardly anyone is ever arrested for being drunk and disturbing the peace alone. I was right. The night court files revealed that Thelma Ibsen had been arrested with 8 other people. I took down their names and began to check them out. Number 6 down the line was a man named Unger, who was in the hosiery business. Yes, he remembered Thelma Ibsen very well. No, he hadn't seen her for 6 months, but he could tell me where she lived. He did. And I went there.
Yes, sir. May I help you?
I'm looking for Miss Thelma Ibsen.
Oh, I'll ring a room. Is she expecting you?
No. My name is Dollar. It's a business matter.
Mr. Dollar.
That's right.
Just a moment. I'm ringing. Well, I don't understand that.
What?
She came in about a half hour ago. I know she's up there.
Well, maybe she came out again.
No, I'd have seen her. I've been at the desk all the time. Well, if that is the strangest thing.
Maybe she's visiting one of the other apartments.
Perhaps. Would you like to leave a message, Mr. Dollar?
Well, it'll be okay if I go up and camp on her doorstep. I've been looking for her for a long time now.
Of course.
I took the elevator up to the 15th floor and walked down the hall to Thelma Ibsen's apartment. The door was standing partially open. All the lights seemed to be on. Miss Ibsen? Miss Ibsen? Miss Ibsen?
Go back. Get away from this room.
What?
Get away or I'll jump.
I'd found Thelma Ibsen, only she was standing on a ledge outside the window, all ready for a leap into eternity.
We'll return to yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. Now, with our star, John Lund, we bring you the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Don't come any closer.
I won't. Thelma,
What?
you better come in now. You don't want to do this.
I'm going to do it.
It's cold out there. Don't you think you should come inside?
I'm going to jump. Stay away now. Don't try to grab me.
I'll do anything you say, Thelma. Okay.
I never saw you before. How do you know my name?
I've seen you.
No, you haven't. I remember people. Watch.
Just going to light a cigarette. Do you want one?
No.
Can I have one?
All right. Where did you see me?
In a picture. In your high school annual. You went to high school in Hartford.
You know you. What's your name?
Johnny Dollar?
Are you from Hartford?
Yeah.
Step over there. Let me see your face in the light. No. You aren't from Hartford. You're lying to me.
Mr. Dollar, I wanted
away.
to...
Go away or I'll jump.
Why, Miss Ibsen...
Go on. Get out of here.
Go ahead. Yes, of course, of course.
I heard you telling to call the police. I don't care. They can't stop me. Nobody can stop me.
Maybe they won't even try, Thelma.
Oh, I know they will. They'll talk to me just the way you're talking. They try to get close enough to grab me. I wanted somebody to call the police. I want them all down there waiting for me to jump. When the crowd's big enough, I'll jump right down there. I'm not afraid to do it.
Why do you want to jump, Thelma?
I have my reasons. Look, there's a couple of people down there who see me. They'd like to see me jump.
I don't think they'd like to see that at all, Thelma.
Oh, yes, they would. They might say they wouldn't, but they'll hang around, and if I don't jump, they'll be disappointed.
Nobody wants you to jump, Thelma.
Oh, sure they do. Those people down there would love to see it happen. You'd like it, too.
If I wanted to see you jump, I'd be waiting on the street with those people. But I don't want to see you do that. And neither do they. I want you to live, Thelma.
There's more people down there now. Oh, getting the big lights up here, God.
Thelma, look. If you're broke, if you need money,
Don't come any closer, I told you before.
I want to help you, Thelma.
Nobody wants to help me. Nobody's ever wanted to help me.
You're wrong about that. Lloyd Turnbull wanted to help you.
Lloyd Turnbull? You met him?
Yes. And he's still very much in love with you.
After I stole money from him and walked out on him?
The money meant nothing to him. He still loves you, Thelma. Thelma?
I don't love him. I never loved him.
He thought so.
He was just nice.
Why did you leave him that way?
I'm no good. Never have been, you know. I've never been any good to anybody.
Would you like to talk to Floyd?
No. I don't want to talk to him or anybody. I know. But after I jump, I want you to tell Floyd something.
Sure.
Tell him I meant to send the money back to him. I didn't think it was that much. Tell him I never was any good at all. But I left him because of that.
All right.
You can tell him I loved him. He'd feel good, I think.
All right.
Go back! I don't care who you are. Go back or I'll jump right now. Wait. Close that hall door. If you want to see me jump, you'll have to watch from the street down there with the others. Close it!
Is he a policeman?
I suppose so. I don't know.
He looked foolish.
We all look foolish at one time or another. It passes.
Do I look foolish?
Yes, Thelma, you do. You're not going through with this. In the end, you'll come back into this room, and everybody down there will go home.
That isn't true. You know, for the first time in my life, I know exactly what I want to do, how I want to do it. I'm going to jump.
From what I know about you, I thought you always knew pretty much what you wanted out of life.
I never knew anything. And it's all botched up. I'd be happy one minute and crying the next. Things kept happening all the time. I got so tired. When Mom and Daddy died, I should have died too. Then I wouldn't be here making all those people down there have bad dreams for weeks to come. I should have been with it when they were killed in that car. Well, it won't be long. I won't be tired anymore pretty soon.
Thelma, wait.
Wait for what? You say you've talked to people who've known me, who know what I was and what I am. I didn't turn out the way they wanted me to, did I? I didn't even turn out the way I wanted to be. Look at me. Why should I wait?
One man I didn't talk to had more faith in you than anybody else. He was an old man who sold newspapers in front of the Metropolitan Building. His name was John Linden. Old John. Thelma? Old John?
Old John.
You met him one day when you were a little girl. It meant a lot in his life. An awful lot. You remember old John?
Yes. downtown after school to look in the windows. I had a nickel and I bought a paper from this old man. I talked to him. He said I was a very nice girl, and he asked me my name and where I lived.
What did you talk about, Thelma?
About school. And about growing up. He told me I'd grow up someday to be a lovely woman. He said, lovely woman. He was very nice.
What else did you talk about?
School. He asked me what grade I was in. Let's see. I guess I was in the 5th grade, or maybe the 6th. It's such a long time ago.
But you remember it.
Of course, I remember it now. Where's John now?
He died a month ago, Thelma. He left you all his money.
What money? What money would that poor old man have?
Insurance money. Comes to $1,000.
You're lying.
No, I'm not, Thelma. That's why I've been looking for you. It's my job to see that you get the money that he left for you. He wanted you to have it.
Why? I didn't know him only that afternoon.
But he wanted to help you.
You're making all this up. It's all a lie.
No. No, look.
What?
These prove I'm from the insurance company. Here.
Throw them over.
All right. You see? He wanted you to have something.
That old man. That poor old man. I want to stop and talk to him.
Expense account item 4, $3.50. Martinis. I needed them. It was my first, and I hope my last, experience with an intended suicide. The psychiatrist who examined and treated Thelma Ibsen believed that she'll make a complete recovery in time. They say it'll take months to determine the exact cause of her breakdown. But as far as we're concerned, the case is closed. Claim filed. Expense account, item 5, same as item 2. Transportation back to Hartford. Total, $84.15. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars John Lund in the title role and is written by E. Jack Newman with music by Eddie Dunstetter. John Lund can currently be seen in the Universal International picture Just Across the Street. Featured in tonight's cast were Tom Tully, Jeanette Nolan, John McIntyre, Joe Kearns, and Virginia Gregg. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dan Coverly inviting you to join us next week at this time when John Lund returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Welcome back. Well, I have to say, one reason that John Lund may have suffered in comparison to Bob Bailey in terms of the Johnny Dollar comparisons is if you listen to the 5-minute Johnny Dollar or 15-minute Johnny Dollar serials that aired in 1955 and 56, it kind of makes some of the episodes look pale by comparison when you look at the Lund versions from which they were often expanded into these 5-part stories. This is kind of the case here. The 15-minute serial version of this story, different characters, different locations, and a few different plot details was a lot better and crisper than this particular version that we heard today. And I think this one, they almost spent a little too much time on the suicide thing, because everything after the commercial break was Johnny Dollar trying to talk this girl down, which is kind of odd for the genre. And I think Lund did a good job with the performance, but definitely not up there with the Bailey 15-minute serial take on this entire story. All right, well, we will have a John Lund extra for you. I'm not certain just quite what. He's got a wide variety of stuff, and probably on Monday when I'm back in Boise, which is actually the Monday before this show airs, but the Monday after I'm recording it. Nice and clear, I know. I'll pick something out, and it will definitely be good, and I think you will enjoy it. London just had a great deal of radio roles that were just fascinating. All right. Well, before we go, I want to get to some listener comments, and we've got those off of Podcast Alley. Comment from John: a thrilling look back into the past world of audio entertainment. It's a great joy to have such a window back into the past before iPads and telephones. Stay classy. And I have another one, Under the Duvet. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, with an iPod in the UK. Thank you. And enjoy the comments on the actors. It is amazing to hear of the past Hollywood stars who starred on old-time radio. Yeah, it really is. There are some shows that are pretty interesting from that point. You know, Alan Ladd, of course, is somebody that we associate with a lot of his tough guy movie roles, as well as the Western Shane. And to hear him in Box 13 was kind of interesting. Same thing with Holmes, even though Bold Venture's not a detective show. In Bold Venture, some of these radio shows, it kind of showed the ability of the actors just to act, because on radio, the actor, you needed really writers and actors. When you get into movies, a lot of it is the directing takes a big part of the role, where the camera pans, the cinematography. But it really depends on the actors on the radio to sell the story, and as well as the writers to provide a good version. So you really see the actors just putting on absolutely great performances on the radio. So definitely a lot more ahead, and thanks so much for the comment. We will be back, and hopefully with slightly better sound quality on Monday with Barrie Craig. And then join us on next Friday for another episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. In the meanwhile, if you have a comment, send it to box13 at greatdetectives.net. Give us a call, 208-991-4783, and become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/radiodetectives. But from Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.